2022 meeting of the State Coastal Conservancy. And of course, this is our first non-COVID meeting. Having gone through the 2 years of not seeing each other, it's so nice to be here in person and also to see all of you, and welcome. My name is Doug Bosco. I chair the Conservancy, and I'd like to begin by introducing some of the other people here on the dais. To my far left is Senator Ben Allen, who's one of our oversight members. Thank you for joining us, Senator. And then next to Senator Allen is Brian Cash. Brian represents the Resources Agency. Next to Brian is Joe Alioto, who was appointed by the governor. To my immediate left is Annie Nodoff, who was appointed by the Senate. And then to my far right is Donnie Brownsey, who is the chairwoman of the State Coastal Commission. And by virtue of that, she sits on our board. And then I'd like to also, of course, introduce our executive officer, Amy Hutzel. And also Carol Hart is here. Carol is the representative of the Coastal Commission, a longtime personal friend, and always does good things for the state. Let's see, Ann White, who's with us for the last time as our board clerk. I hope I didn't jump the gun by announcing that.
We'll do more later.
All right. Ann, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Good morning, Conservancy Board. I would now call the roll. Ms. Nodoff?
Here.
Ms. Brownsey?
Present.
Mr. Cash?
Here.
Ms. Gutierrez-Grandich? Ms. Miller? Mr. Alioto?
Here.
Chair Bosco?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you.
Great. And this is Amy Hutzel, Executive Officer. I just wanted to acknowledge that we are doing a hybrid board meeting. This is our first attempt at a hybrid board meeting, so we do ask that everybody in person and hopefully out there on Zoom have patience with us. If you are here in person and plan to speak on an agenda item, please fill out a speaker card and provide the speaker card to Ann, who will give it to me, who will give it to Doug. That's it's complicated. The speaker cards, I believe, are on the table over there. So that includes grantees and partners on projects. Please fill out a speaker card. If you are on Zoom or on the phone and want to speak on an item, then when that item comes up, please either press the raise hand function on Zoom or press *9 on your phone. And somebody will know that you've done that. And we will have the public speakers on Zoom or on phone speak after the public speakers who are here in person. So thank you. Okay, and then approval of the minutes.
Yeah. Okay, our first item will be approval of the minutes of our last meeting. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, by the way, we don't have to have roll call votes anymore since we're in person. So
That's right.
all those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, no, and the minutes are approved. Next, we will go on to the consent items. These are matters that generally under $250,000 or continuations of previously approved projects. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak on the consent calendar?
We should have a motion to approve the minutes.
Move approval. Second.
Oh, all right.
Right.
Yeah, we had the vote before the motion. Okay. Thank you.
We're relearning how to do non-Zoom board meetings.
Now we have to do both, the Zoom and the non-Zoom. That'll be interesting. Okay. The consent items, are there any members of the public that would like to speak on any of the consent items? Do we have anyone in Zoom land? that would like
There are
to?
no raised hands.
All right. Then do I hear a motion that we approve this consent calendar?
So moved.
All right, Ms. Noddle moves.
Mr. Chairman, I second.
Mr. Aliota seconds. Those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, no. And the consent calendar is approved. Okay, we now go on to the executive officer's report. Amy?
Yes. Thank you. And we're just discussing Wi-Fi, which it sounds like there is not, there's. Okay.
Did you get it figured out?
So if you're in the room, CNRA guest is the Wi-Fi with no password. Yeah, don't use up our bandwidth, people.
I have mine in writing, you see.
Yeah.
Here you go. David.
I'm sorry. Zipping through. So before we present on the executive officer report, I want to take this opportunity to thank Annalika White, Ann White, who has been our board clerk for the Conservancy since 2016. So 5 years, including through some very difficult transitions during this pandemic. She's done an amazing job as board clerk, and she recently accepted a new job at the Coastal Conservancy, thank goodness, in our Human Resources Department. So we're really happy for her. We're really happy for the agency. She's going to bring her amazing organizational skills and her really can-do attitude to our recruitment, hiring, and retention efforts with a focus on diversity and inclusion at our agency. But we're going to miss her as board clerk. Devin Bancod is going to serve as board clerk right over here. And we're going to figure out the permanent solution for board clerk very soon. So with that, we have a card circulating with the board and a gift for you, a small gift. Thank you, Anne. All right, it's so nice to be able to, hand a gift to another human being, chocolates. So now on to the EO report, which consists of 2 presentations. The first is the legislative report by Deputy Executive Officer Mary Small.
Morning. Actually, in the interest of time, I was going to simply offer that to me for interest. We provided you a list of bills that we are tracking. The rest is still in flux, but I'm happy to answer any questions or at this point we still don't know.
But we'll know soon.
Oh, tricky. Okay. I think you heard me. I have no presentation.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing it was a short report.
It was a good thing it was a short presentation. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Great. And next is a report on Hollister Ranch by Central Coast Regional Manager Trish Chapman.
Good morning, board members. This morning, I'll give you a brief recap of our ongoing work to provide public access to the Hollister Ranch coastline in Santa Barbara County. And we're currently working on 3 different efforts, and this is all also summarized in the written executive officer memo. So as you know, we've been in litigation with the Hollister Ranch Owners Association and individual ranch owners regarding our acceptance in 2013 of an offer to dedicate public access that stemmed from an earlier coastal development permit to develop a YMCA facility on the ranch. At the time, the YMCA owned one of the parcels. After we accepted the OTD, the Owners Association and individual landowners sued the Conservancy and the Coastal Commission, questioning the validity of the OTD. In 2017, the Conservancy and Commission entered a settlement agreement with the Homeowners Association, but subsequently the courts have determined that we did not follow proper public meeting procedure prior to entering that agreement, and so the settlement is no longer valid. The Conservancy does not intend to take the steps to re-enter the settlement agreement. Instead, the parties are preparing to go to trial on the original questions of the OTD's validity. We'll keep you updated on that process, but it is slow moving. The second effort is a collaboration among the Conservancy, the Coastal Commission, State Lands Commission, and State Parks to develop and implement a contemporary Hollister Ranch coastal access program. And on the consent calendar, you just passed an item that authorizes funding for the next steps in the development of the program. The funding will all come from a 2021 $10 million appropriation to the Conservancy for public access at Hollister Ranch. And specifically, the team will be developing an environmental impact report for the program. The Coastal Commission will be the CEQA lead agency, but the State Lands Commission will actually oversee the consultant team because they have more experience with CEQA documents, and the Conservancy is providing the funding. We will also be preparing a cultural and tribal resource study that will feed into the EIR, but this will be done in a separate process to facilitate interested Chumash tribes taking a leadership role in the development of the study. State Parks will lead the coordination with the tribes and the development of the study scope. And lastly, a key piece to providing public access to the Hollister Ranch beaches is to acquire public access rights through the ranch to the public beaches. State Lands Commission will be leading the effort, starting with an appraisal of the property rights that are needed to implement the program. The third effort that we've been working on is working with the Homeowners Association to provide some level of increased voluntary public access to the ranch beaches prior to implementation of the Coastal Access Program, and to assist with developing the scope of this early access and ensuring that it will provide equitable access. The state agency team and the Ranch Owners Association recently created an advisory committee. The committee members represent various user groups such as the Guadalupe Dune Center, Chumash tribes, the Gaviota Coast Conservancy, as well as individual ranch owners. We'd like to help support this early access with some funding that could pay for transportation for programming similar to the Explore the Coast program, and also for Chumash education guides to accompany group trips. But staff is still working through how we can do this in compliance with CEQA, and so we may be bringing a funding proposal to you in September. I also want to acknowledge that separate from the early access program, the Owners Association has invited Chumash tribal members to visit the ranch beaches in recent months, and 2 or 3 tribes are discussing longer-term, more expansive access arrangements with the Owners Association. That's my update, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Trish?
I just thank you for that update. I think it's important for us and the public to keep up to date on the efforts to provide access at Hollister. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, Amy, is that?
Mr. Chair, sorry, I decided I
I'm
would say,
sorry.
no, it's not
No,
at
no,
all,
go
no, I decided to say something, so I apologize, but I just want to add that this is to what Ms. Nothoff just said. This is such a difficult and challenging process because it has been decades in the just drifting, and I just think it's so important that the state articulated how important that public access is for those incredible beaches. I mean, it's an incredible coastline for anyone who's been down there. I did a tour, and but it does present a number of challenging issues, but I think all of them are surmountable. with just a lot of hard work. And I'm just hoping that the faction of the property owners who are fairly united in opposition to allowing public access can be overcome by those property owners who are working hard to find the right balance with our state partners. So I just want to thank you very much. I know it's a difficult and kind of stressful on some levels assignment, and but I do believe that the people of the state of California should be able to enjoy those beautiful, beautiful beaches. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I've been on the Conservancy for 17 years now, and I think looking back at all that time, we've been involved in many, many issues, but this is the epitome of why we're here, to provide access for the public to the California coast. And so we've got to win this one. It's our reason for being, and we're going to stick with it for sure. All right, is that the end of your report,
Yeah,
Amy?
that concludes the EO report. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Trish.
Thank you very much.
So I'll just stay.
Uh,
I'm with
Okay.
you for the next two items, so I'll just stay up here.
All right, we're now going to move on to the project part of our agenda.
Were there any public comments on the executive officer report?
There were no public comments.
Okay.
I don't know. Are there any?
No,
Okay, good. All right. Let's go on then to item 5, which is, Trish, you're going to give that presentation?
Yes, I am.
Okay, go ahead.
Should I start? Okay. Good morning, Chairman Bosco and members of the board. I will be presenting the YMCA Camp Jones Gulch Conservation Easement on behalf of Hillary Hill. Staff recommends that the Conservancy authorize disbursement of up to $950,000 to Sempervirens Fund to acquire a conservation easement on the YMCA Camp Jones Gulch property for natural resource and water protection, habitat restoration, open space protection, education, and recreation. Next slide, please. The YMCA Camp Jones Gulch property is approximately 915 acres and is located approximately 5 miles south of the town of La Honda in unincorporated San Mateo County in the Santa Cruz Mountains. The property is part of the headwaters of Pescadero Creek Watershed, draining to the Pacific Ocean, and is contiguous to 10,000 acres of protected lands, including Pescadero Creek County Park to the east and Memorial County Park to the west. The property is identified as a high priority for protection in the Santa Cruz Mountains Redwoods Conservation Area Protection Plan. Next slide, please. For over 80 years, this property has been used as a YMCA camp and retreat center. The camp serves 23,000 youth from the greater San Francisco Bay Area every year, primarily from public schools, offering connection with wilderness, leadership training, and ecological education that builds the next generation of stewards. The camp footprint is on 93 of the acres and is developed with structures for camp facilities such as cabins, a dining hall, and the remainder of the property has high conservation value. Next slide, please. The property has a rich mosaic of largely intact ecological systems, including over 200 acres of redwood forest with 39 acres of old growth redwood, and including one area called the Valley of Giants. The property also has 9 miles of headwater streams, including Jones and McCormick Creeks, which provide habitat for endangered coho salmon and threatened steelhead. Other habitats on the property include more than 400 acres of Doug fir forest and 100 acres of coastal prairie grassland. Altogether, the property supports 45 species of rare and endangered wildlife and plants. Next slide, please. As you can see in this map on the property, there are 2 creeks that cross the property north to south, highlighted in blue. In the darker green is the redwood forest, and the old growth area being the areas in the southeastern area of the property. The camp part of the property is hatched in orange. The easement will preserve the natural, scenic, open space and forest resources on the property while also ensuring the long-term economic viability of the camp. The YMCA has previously explored but did not implement several options that could provide revenue to the camp, which include commercial timber harvest or subdivision of the property to sell off part of the property's acreage. With the property is a win-win. The property's high conservation value will be protected, and funds received by the YMCA from the sale of the easement will ensure that they can continue camp operations. Through the conservation easement, the YMCA retains ownership of the property, and Semper Virens Fund will hold the easement. The easement will prevent development, subdivision, and commercially driven timber harvest in perpetuity, and will require a stewardship plan to be developed to promote proactive restoration on the property. Revenue gained through the sale will go back into the property and allow the YMCA to address deferred maintenance, including making cabins accessible for people with physical disabilities and adding bathrooms to its cabins. This last slide has a breakdown of the funding sources for the project. The conservation easement was appraised as having a fair market value of over $10.4 million, but the YMCA is providing it as a bargain sale of the property. The $950,000 proposed conservancy funds for this project are expected to come from an appropriation from Prop 68, specifically for the protection, restoration, and improvement of coastal forest watersheds. And last slide, so thank you. And now Sarah Barth, the Executive Director from Semper Virens Funds, would like to say a few words, and then we'll both be available to answer any questions about the project.
Well, thank you. Mostly I wanted to thank you all for considering this grant. Trish, I think, really ably described the ecological importance of this easement. But there are two things I wanted to add because I think they are so important to the Conservancy's values and priorities. One is every San Mateo County kid in public school goes to this camp. And so this camp is about equitable access for kids in that county. And the camp was worried about how they were going to fund continuation of operations. And so this really is a win-win in terms of not only protecting this amazing landscape, but helping to ensure that this camp continues to really provide stewardship training, exposure to the outdoors for the next generation. So just want to make sure you know what a good thing you're doing if you fund this. And secondly, unlike most easements, Semper Virens Fund and the Y have agreed to a long-term partnership that will be about not only us monitoring what they do on the property, but really working together to restore this incredible landscape and reduce the risk of wildfire. So I think you will see us not only protect this landscape, but help to restore it over the long term. So thank you very much again for considering this grant. And it's nice to see many of you in person.
Thank you, Ms. Barth. Are there any members of the public that want to comment on item 5? How about anyone out there?
There are no raised hands.
Okay. Are there any members of our board that have questions or comments?
I would just say that as a public kid that went to public school in San Mateo County, I would like to move approval. Second.
All right. Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve item 5. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. That item's approved. Thank you, Trish.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to say one thing. I really appreciated, and Annie, what you said, because when I was a kid growing up in Philadelphia, the public recs department would take us to camp up in the Appalachians, and I still remember that as some of my happiest memories as a kid. And so I'm sure those kind of memories are being, the same is happening at that camp and how important these projects are. I just want to thank everybody for the collaborative work that they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go on to item 6, and again, Trish Chapman is going to present that. You're getting a real workout today, Trish.
Yes. Yes, I'm going to present the Finch Creek Fish Passage at Hastings Reserve project. I'll be presenting this project for Tom Gansberry, who was also unable to attend today. Next slide, please. Staff recommend authorizing a grant of $850,000 to the University of California to replace a river crossing on Finch Creek in the Carmel River watershed. Shown here, the concrete ford blocks the migration of steelhead in nearly all flow conditions. The crossing is located where Finch Creek runs through the UC Hastings Natural History Reservation, which is owned and managed by the University of California. Next slide, please. Hastings Reserve is approximately 2,500 acres located high in the Carmel River watershed, adjacent to East Carmel Valley Road. It is the oldest of approximately 40 UC natural reserves. The site is used for graduate level research, but it also holds field trips for K through 12 students. The reserve has a staff of 3 who maintain the facilities and manage visitors. Next slide, please. In 2014, the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District identified this site as a barrier to fish migration in a study it conducted on barriers in 4 tributaries to the Carmel River. That study has served as a template for prioritizing the removal of barriers within the watershed to increase access to high-quality spawning habitat for steelhead. Removing these barriers also helps restore the natural sediment transport. This barrier was the 6th most significant barrier identified in the study, with excellent spawning and rearing habitat located upstream. The other higher priority barriers listed in the report have already been addressed, most with the help of Conservancy funding. These photos show that the crossing is quite small, but the project is not simple as it might look, since the replacement bridge must meet modern engineering standards and fish passage requirements. You can see that the fish is well vegetated and otherwise in good condition. Next slide, please. The construction steps for this project are similar to others that have been implemented on small streams. Construction will occur in the fall of 2023 and will include demolition of the concrete ford, building the bridge abutments and wing walls, installing the bridge, and then revegetating the disturbed area and resurfacing the road. Biological and cultural monitoring will occur throughout construction, and it is expected that the Esalen tribe of Monterey County will assist with this monitoring. After construction, monitoring will continue for 2 years, and the reserve plans to involve students in monitoring and study of the stream as the site evolves. Conservancy funding for this project will be from the Carmel River Settlement Account, created as a result of a settlement between the National Marine Fisheries Service and California American Water to mitigate for the impacts to steelhead from CalAm's overpumping of Carmel River water. The settlement funds can only be used for projects that benefit steelhead within the Carmel River watershed. Construction will be managed by UC Berkeley's Office of Capital Projects, the reserve director, and a consulting project engineer. The reserve director and UC students will undertake project monitoring to comply with permit requirements. The Resource Conservation District of Monterey County will also assist with the permit requirements. I believe that Dr. Jen Hunter of the reserve is on line if there's questions, or I may be able to answer questions.
Okay, are there any questions or comments from the board? All right, are there any public members that want to comment on this?
We have one public comment.
We have one? Okay, can you put them on?
This is going to test the whole situation.
Yeah, they're not showing up.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. There
We
it
have
is.
a test person on, a real person, but it'll test our techniques. Yeah.
Jen Hunter, you may speak now.
Oh, okay.
Hi there.
Jen Hunter
I'm
from UC Berkeley.
indeed. I'm joining you from the Hastings Reserve. I'm sorry to not be able to be there with you guys in person. Oh, are you able to hear me?
No audio coming through.
No audio.
Can you test?
Well,
Mr. Chair, while we're waiting, I just want to say I really appreciate how this project is a complement to all the work that's been done downstream and will be done downstream on the Carmel River. So excellent project. I did want to point out the map is inaccurate because it still lists that San Clemente Dam is there.
Yeah, we gotta fix that.
Yeah, and while we're waiting, I just, on the last, oh.
Yay!
Oh,
Okay, we can hear you.
okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I'm Jen. I'm the director at the Hastings Reserve. I know you guys have a lot to get to accomplish today, so I just wanted to say thank you for considering this opportunity to reconnect several miles of the Upper Carmel River watershed. This is a real opportunity for us at Hastings because it also provides a learning opportunity for our graduate students and undergraduate classes and K through 12 classes when they come through the reserve. So I'll leave it at that. If anybody's got questions, I'm happy to answer those. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Hunter. All right, do I hear a motion and a second? Mr. Cash
Move
moves.
approval?
and
Yeah.
Ms. Notoff seconds that we approve item 6. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. That item is approved. Thank you, Trish. We'll now go on to item 7, on the north coast, Great Redwood Trail Authority. And Karen Gear and Peter Cherish are going to introduce this.
Okay. Good morning, Chair Bosco and members of the board. I'm Karen Gear, North Coast Regional Manager, and Peter Jarash and I will be presenting the Great Redwood Trail Project for your consideration today. First, I'd like to draw your attention to the addendum to the staff recommendation, which you should have received and was posted yesterday on the web, which increases the requested funding amount from $2.5 million to $3.5 million. Over the last week, we received revised estimates for planning and organizational development consulting services, and we're also made aware that we are going to need to help fund some of the rail banking processes this summer. And as a result, we are asking for an additional funding authorization today to make sure that we adequately cover all those costs. All the funding for this project comes from a $10.3 million general fund appropriation in the current fiscal year budget, specifically for the Great Redwood Trail. Today's staff recommendation has 2 components. The first is a requested authorization for the executive officer to enter into a joint powers agreement with the Great Redwood Trail Agency, which I will refer to as GRTA because it's too much of a mouthful, which will enable the Conservancy to provide the staffing and technical support to the GRTA. The proposed JPA is included in Exhibit 2 of the staff recommendation. Secondly, staff is recommending the Conservancy authorize disbursement of $3.5 million for planning, engineering and environmental services, public outreach, organizational development, rail banking support, interim staffing, and any other services as may be required to advance the trail. Slide 2, please. In our presentation today, we're going to touch a little bit on the history of the rail line and how we've arrived at this moment in time with the rail transitioning to trail, describe how we will work with the GRTA, and then give some detail about what will be included in the first phase of this effort. Slide 3, please. This slide provides the vision of what we hope will one day be the connector trail, known as the Great Redwood Trail, stretching for over 300 miles from San Francisco Bay all the way to Humboldt Bay. The advantage this trail will have is that the alignment is already owned by only 2 entities. The Sonoma Marin Area Transit, or SMART, holds the line for Marin and Sonoma now, and the Great Redwood Trail Agency for the Mendocino, Trinity, and Humboldt County sections. The alignment is not without its challenges, though, as you will see later in the presentation as Peter shares some photos of current conditions. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give a very brief history of the alignment, and Chair Doug Bosco can regale you with many stories, I'm sure, over lunch if you'd like to know.
Don't wish that on
more.
everyone, please.
But the rail was started construction in the late 1880s. It was completed by 1914, and for a number of decades, it then provided services both for passengers and freight between San Francisco and Humboldt Bay. But over the decades, use of the line diminished as the use of cars and trucks became more popular and maintenance costs were very high. There's a lot of erosion in the Eel River Canyon and some other spots along the line. So by the 1980s, the line was in bankruptcy. Wishing to preserve the rail corridor, the state stepped in and created the North Coast Rail Authority, and funding was found from the feds and the state to actually purchase the line. But unfortunately, by the mid-1990s, there was another round of erosion and problems, and the rail in the Eel River Canyon stopped. And by 1998, the Federal Railway Administration had ordered the entire rail line closed due to safety concerns. A portion of that line was eventually reopened and repaired, and in 2011 for freight service, but that was only for the line south of Windsor. The line north of Windsor never reopened. Next slide, please. So with the recognition that the cost of rehabbing the line north of Windsor was exorbitant and not economically supportable, and the NCRA now mired in debt and no funding available to open the rail line, support for reusing the rail corridor for a rail-to-trail project increased, and Senator Mcguire authored Senate Bill 1029, the NCRA Closure and Transition to Trails Act, which was enacted in 2018. The act required, among other things, a feasibility analysis of developing the trail along the rail corridor, and a link to that feasibility analysis is included in your staff rec as Exhibit 3. A lot of work was done under that process by Resource Agency led the work with state parks, as well as the Caltrans and State Transportation Agency. The analysis was completed in 2020, and after considering its findings, the legislature approved Senator Mcguire's next bill, Senate Bill 69, the Great Redwood Trail Act. Next slide, please. So the Great Redwood Trail Act does a number of things. First and foremost, it changes the NCRA to the Great Redwood Trail Agency. So instead of an agency that was focused on ensuring continued rail, we now have an agency that's focus and mission is to ensure the development of this trail system. It required the GRTA to transfer the portion of the line south of the Mendocino border to SMART for their ownership and management, and they will be developing rail with trail along their section of track. And then left the rest of the holdings within the GRTA, the Mendocino, Trinity, and Humboldt County sections. It also directs the GRTA to plan and implement the trail along the corridor, and provides for the GRTA to contract with the Coastal Conservancy or another agency to staff the agency for the purposes of the trail. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. So how are we going to do this? The proposed joint powers agreement provides the structure for the Conservancy to provide staffing and technical support. And the $10.3 million that's currently in our budget provides us the money to pay for the staff and pay for the technical expertise that we're going to need. The Conservancy staff will lead the master planning process, which is going to have a robust public engagement component. And in addition to the Conservancy staff that will be working on the project, we will be getting organizational development services from consultants with expertise. We need to help stand up the GRTA as an entity. We need to get its policies in place and how it's going to operate. They're also going to help develop a funding strategy for the GRTA, because this is, part of the problem with the NCRA was they never had the money to operate. So we need to be creative about how funding sources can be developed. Right now, there's a small amount that comes in through leases and like fiber optic cable. There are potential opportunities for doing more of that in the future, which would provide an ongoing stream. We are also developing an interagency agreement with Sonoma County, who currently provides the accounting and payroll services for GRTA, and we will be continuing that relationship with the county. And next slide, please. And then in terms of the planning, which Peter is going to talk about in more detail, I just wanted to show you the map that's on the screen now is the portion of the trail that we are responsible for helping to develop the master plan for. So it's the Mendocino-Sonoma County line northward all the way to Humboldt Bay. It's over 200 miles of beautiful, beautiful land, and land that most people don't have access to, particularly through the Eel River Canyon. It's going to be a very challenging project, but it's a super exciting new program, I think, for us to be engaged in. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Peter to give you more details about the plan.
Members of the Conservancy, thank you for the opportunity to help present the Great Redwood Trail project to you today. My portion of the presentation is going to focus on the next big steps that we're taking to develop the trail master plan and community outreach effort. For the sake of the discussion today, I'm going to separate them into two different efforts, but in reality, the community engagement and master planning process are going to feed directly into each other. Next slide, please. The community engagement project is an exciting opportunity to talk to the public in Mendocino, Humboldt, and Trinity counties about the trail, to gather their ideas, hear their concerns, and build a vision for the trail. There's already a great deal of support for the trail, as anyone who has attended one of Senator Mcguire's town hall meetings can tell you. In addition, both Humboldt and Mendocino counties have constructed sections of the trail already and are actively designing new ones. The pictures on this slide are sections of trail that have already been constructed. The community outreach will likely start with focus on three important groups: tribes whose ancestral territory the trail travels through, and some of whom who own adjacent property, landowners with property adjacent to the trail, and local governments. Each of these groups is likely to have slightly different concerns and visions for the trail. The outreach effort will also make sure and reach out to the general public and community groups who are likely to use the trail. We anticipate a robust public outreach program with a great deal of participation. The Trail Master Plan will capture the community's vision and tackle some very concrete issues. It will provide guidance and recommendations for how the trail can be constructed in segments that serve both local communities as well as users who want to travel long distances from Mendocino to Humboldt. The nuts and bolts topics that the master plan will need to include are things such as frameworks for partnerships between local county governments and the GRTA, as this is super critical in getting the trail built and maintained over the long term. Many other topics will include such issues such as design recommendations for keeping the trail users and adjacent landowners happy, trail user safety, and how to maintain the existing right-of-way. The master plan will also be an opportunity to explore partnerships with environmental nonprofits and resource agencies who are interested in doing restoration work through the Eel River Canyon and elsewhere. 4 firms have submitted proposals to tackle the master plan and community outreach program. Conservancy staff are currently reviewing the proposals and look forward to working with one of the firms. We expect their master plan and community outreach process to start in July. Next slide, please. These slides are intended to give you a brief look at the opportunities and challenges to building the Great Redwood Trail. As you can see from the first one, there are sections of trail that have been constructed and are greatly, back, I guess, one slide. As you saw in the previous one, we have existing trail that's out there and people are using it and very happy to do so. Next slide, please. On this one, you see that we have both sections of trail, like on the left, that are in fabulous condition and are ready to go, and issues on the right where erosion has taken out a culvert and there considerable work will need to happen. On the next slide, you'll see 2 sections of trail that are also in relatively nice shape, where it will be relatively straightforward to tackle. And then on the final slide is an example of some of the infrastructure. Next slide, please. That will take some work. These are a couple of the tunnels. The one on the left obviously will need considerable effort, as the entrance there on the one on the right is still in beautiful condition and should be relatively straightforward. This concludes staff's presentation. I would now like to introduce Carol Hart, chair of the Great Redwood Trail Agency, who would like to make a couple of comments.
Good morning, Chair Bosco and members of the Coastal Conservancy. I'm so happy to be here today. As your chair just mentioned, I am currently vice chair of the Coastal Commission, serving with Chair Donna Brownsey, of course, is on your board. But more importantly, as I stand here today, I am the chair of the Great Redwood Trail Agency. As Karen Gear just mentioned, just came into existence on March 1st of this year. I will say that you handle many and fund many amazing projects, but nevertheless, I would say to you, this is a truly momentous occasion and moment for the Conservancy and certainly for the Great Redwood Trail Agency. This project goes back, I was just speaking with Chair Bosco, from the time that he actually sponsored legislation to preserve this rail line back when he was in the United States legislature. And I don't recall exactly what year that was, but approximately 40 years ago.
Years ago.
He was a teenager, or maybe about 10. No. In any event,
I earned this white hair.
It's been a very long road, and I'm going to try to avoid rail or trail. And, you can say a lot of things about going down the line or, whatever. But I will skip all that and get to the point, which is that with the creation of the Great Redwood Trail, we will have the longest rail trail in the country, a bay-to-bay line that, when you think about future generations, this is what I believe you should think about, the incredible opportunity for people to get out on this trail in the urban sections, like through Ukiah or around Humboldt Bay, to be on a paved trail through sections through the Eel River Canyon. It'll be primarily obviously a dirt trail, sort of like the Pacific Crest Trail. And it will be a truly amazing experience. One of the things that hasn't been mentioned, but I'm sure you will recall, the Conservancy funded the acquisition of what was then the Dean Witter property in the canyon, a 30,000 acre, absolutely a magnificent piece of land that contains a huge chunk of the Great Redwood Trail line, and will provide a stopping off point for hikers and people that are on the river to hike in and enjoy camping and the other facilities that are going to be provided there as well. Just enjoy that amazing property. They also own the Spy Rock property, as well as at the end of the river, they own property. But this trail will go sort of through so many types of experiences. From Sonoma County, you can get off and on the SMART train up through Cloverdale when that's created, and then head up through the vineyards and other types of agriculture, which we're familiar with, of Mendocino County, and then into the Eel River Canyon, then out through the Founders Grove, which Save the Redwoods League is currently in the beginning a new project to rehab, and then ultimately end up at Arcata. It'll connect with the Coastal Trail, which you all have been so involved in helping to form. So we're just so grateful for your consideration here today. The Great Redwood Trail Agency, made up of primarily county supervisors from the various counties. We are all united and dedicated to making this happen, starting with rail banking and moving forward with all of the public engagement and the planning. And I remember at the time, I was on NCRA, now it's been 5 years I've been involved with this project. And I remember we were talking about what is the best agency to partner with? Is there, in all of state government, what is the agency that we want to work with on the planning? And we all agreed without barely any discussion, it's the Coastal Conservancy. That is the perfect partner. That is who we need to partner with. So we're so grateful to be at this moment in time, and look forward to hopefully a very positive vote on our joint powers agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hart. All right, are there any comments from the board? Yes, Ms. Browning.
Thank you. I just want to offer my wholehearted support for this project. I think I have great confidence in the project coming to fruition because Carol Hart is involved with her just endless energy and commitment to nature and to improving the access to nature for the public in California, and also because Karen Gear is involved for the Conservancy, bringing her experience and expertise. And so, speaking as a resident of Mendocino County, I am so excited about this project because it is going to go through some of the most absolutely beautiful land in our state. And not to say that other parts of the state aren't beautiful, but of course, I think our part of the state is the most beautiful because of the beautiful redwood forest, but also I think it will serve as a conduit to have some of the through hikers explore coastal loops, which, you know, makes this a really unique trail. I also think that this will be an economic engine for a lot of those small towns, which have been struggling since the collapse of the lumber industry and the fishing industry. And I do believe that people will come from all over the world, not just California and the United States, to walk, bike, skateboard, roller skate, whatever, run along this trail. And so I just want to offer my wholehearted support, and I just can't wait for all the updates. And hopefully I won't be too old, also having earned my white hair, so that I'll be able to do a through hike on this trail someday. But I have confidence, given your involvement, Ms. Gear and Ms. Hart. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brownsy. I want to add to your comments. I predict here and now that, first of all, we are making history with this vote, because this will be the most popular trail in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I know that Lewis and Clark, up till now had it on us, but we are creating here the most popular trail to be, and probably in the world. I have had the opportunity to see much of this property, but we always marveled that the only way you can see it is by the rail. And of course, the rail hasn't operated. So this will open up the most spectacular, not just scenery, but everything: wildlife, water, water opportunities. The Eel River goes through many different characteristics that can accommodate swimmers, kayakers, serious kayakers, canoers. It'll be a wonderful thing for people, and it'll take a long time to do this, many, many years. But even the project itself will be so beneficial to everyone, including all of us here that have had any part of it. So I really thank everyone, Ms. Hart, especially, certainly Senator Mcguire, whom I think may join us a little later on for doing this. It is going to be a spectacular gift for the people of California. And I'm going to ask you to call the roll, because I'm going to recuse myself for various reasons. But
Mr. Chairman, can I move that we approve?
all right, Ms. Brownsy moves.
I would like to second.
And Mr. Eliotto seconds that we approve item 7.
All right, so I'm going to call the roll. Ms. Notoff? Aye. Ms. Brownsy?
Aye.
Mr. Cash?
Aye.
Mr. Aliotto?
Aye.
Chair Bosco?
I recuse myself.
Awesome. All right, this
All
motion
right,
passes.
item 7 is
We have
approved.
one call-in comment.
Oh, okay. We have a call in. Please.
Numbers, last 4 digits is 3319. You can talk now.
Good morning. My name is Robert Fundehoek, and I'm an environmental scientist. And thank you for the opportunity to speak. And thank you for protecting the Redwoods and having the public be able to have access. And so I'm all positive about that. I was reluctant to chime in positively, because at the very beginning of several items back, around item 3, when it asked for public comment and no one said anything, the chairman said, "Good." And there was a sarcastic part to that, because he didn't want to have public comment, is how I interpreted that. And I picked that up on the body language of your colleagues, Mr. Chairman, who also picked up that that was inappropriate. And I noticed this in previous meetings of the Conservancy too, but I did move forward and decided I'll chime in here about the positive Coastal Conservancy with this trail. And, you know, and with the steelhead trout on the Carmel River and having the UC Berkeley professor of the Hastings Reserve, which is reputable, speak positive. And I want to speak on the other items before that too, 654, but you really discouraged me, and I don't think you're very positive, and you make inappropriate jokes, but nonetheless, thanks for saving the Redwoods, and remembering that it's the people, not the politicians, who make this happen, or the elected or appointed commissioners, that it was the public. And how do you make sensitive access now so that it's not just all kinds of access? Well, we know that people aren't going to be able to have guns on the trail, and that's good. But we still have logging going on in the redwood forests of the coast, and you're even going to allow some logging on the Ymca property that you voted to spend money on earlier this morning. But I hope a little criticism isn't considered negative here. It's meant to be productive and positive, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Okay, are there any other public comments?
There are no other comments.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted really quick, I was remiss in not mentioning the great work of my state senator, Senator Mcguire, and again, formidable in terms of his dedication and energy to this project. He has been an extraordinary leader, and I just wanted to put that in the public record, so I really appreciate your forbearance. Thank you.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate your comment on it, and we are expecting Senator Mcguire, I believe, at 11:30 to Zoom in. He very much wanted to be here. He has a lot of hearings today, so he's going to participate by Zoom, and we weren't sure what time to tell him. But this would not be happening without Senator Mcguire, obviously. He has been an Energizer Bunny on this project, and he will continue to be an Energizer Bunny on this project. And we really appreciate his support, and he is both my personal senator as well as my region's senator, so I really appreciate Senator Mcguire.
I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Assemblyman Ward, who's I wanted to introduce you. I'm sorry I didn't notice that you had come in. Welcome. Assemblyman Ward is one of our oversight members. We're very happy to have you here, and anytime you want to speak, please let me know. Okay. All right, we're going to move on now to item 8, and that is a South Coast item. Megan Cooper will present that.
Good morning, Chair Bosco and members of the Conservancy. I have to use these nowadays. I'm Megan Cooper, and today I am recommending that the board authorize up to $11.5 million to the Trust for Public Land to acquire the Banny Ranch property in Orange County. This requested amount was changed from the original staff rec by an addendum that you received due to the possibility that we might not be receiving one of the matching fund sources that we had planned on. So both the Conservancy and the Wildlife Conservation Board are increasing our authorized amounts, our up to amounts, in order to close that funding gap. That addendum also changed, just clarified a date in there for when our tribal engagement work started on this project. I also wanted to point out before I get started that you received a printed comment letter today from the Secret Places Institute. I wanted to apologize to tribal members for the miscommunication on when the comment letters were due so that they could be included in your board packets, but you did receive that printed letter. That printed letter has proposed changes to the resolution, which staff proposes the board discuss after public comments if that works for you. So now I will go ahead and get started. You could go to the next slide. So the Banny Ranch property is a 401-acre property in the city of Newport Beach. and in unincorporated areas of Orange County. Immediately after acquisition by the Trust for Public Land, this property will be transferred to the Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority for management as public open space. The acquisition of Banning Ranch has been sought after by conservation groups for decades, as community groups, indigenous tribes, and residents fought off development to protect the site's unique coastal habitats. Overwhelming support for this project is evidenced by the hundreds of support letters that you have in your packet. The acquisition of Banning Ranch is an extremely rare opportunity to protect and enhance coastal resources damaged by decades of oil production, to protect endangered species habitat, to create new multi-benefit public parkland, to protect cultural resources, and to provide access and use for tribes to their ancestral homelands within this highly developed coastal region. Public ownership of Banning Ranch will also prevent viable, high-density residential development on the property. This property is one of the largest remaining private parcels that we still have remaining in Southern California. Next slide. Banning Ranch spans 401 acres, as I said, of undeveloped land between the urban and densely populated cities of Newport Beach and Costa Mesa in Orange County, where the Santa Ana River meets the Pacific. Next slide. I wish I had a pointer. Sorry, I don't. The site is adjacent to the Santa Ana River Trail, which is also a program of the Coastal Conservancy. It's adjacent to restored wetlands that are managed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. It's also next to Talbot Park and Fairview Parks, which are large regional open space parks managed by the county. And it is blocks away from the Pacific Ocean. Next slide. Oil production began at Banning Ranch in the late 1940s and continues today, with only 10% of established wells in operation on the property. Years of oil production on the property has led to degraded habitats and a lack of public access, but it has also spared the property from further development. Next slide. The Banning Ranch acquisition involves fee title acquisition of 384 acres of the 401 acre site. The property's oil operations will be confined to a 17-acre portion, which is hard to see on this, but it is the light blue or light brown shaded area there on the slide. So that is the 17-acre, it's called oil remainder site of the 401-acre property. Next slide. Acquisition of Banning Ranch will provide the opportunity to restore and enhance approximately 100 acres of coastal wetlands, which, as we know, have seen major declines throughout the state. The approximately 100 acres of wetlands are currently cut off from tidal influence, but could be reconnected to the tides through the adjacent Santa Ana River marsh, restoring critical estuarine habitat. The Coastal Conservancy was successful in receiving a $1 million grant from the National Coastal Wetlands Conservation Program to protect these existing wetlands and the potential for future restoration. In addition, acquisition of Banning Ranch will ensure permanent protection of rare and important coastal habitat types. Biologically diverse mix of freshwater emergent wetlands, estuarine wetlands, mesas, vernal pools, riparian woodlands, coastal bluff sage scrub, and grasslands all thrive within Banning Ranch's boundaries. The project will secure documented habitat for nearly 20 threatened or endangered wildlife species, such as California gnatcatcher, burrowing owl, and San Diego fairy shrimp. Next slide. Securing the property for public open space will provide new green space and parkland for tens of thousands of residents within walking distance, including many more throughout Southern California. There are roughly 30,000 disadvantaged and park-poor community residents that live adjacent to or less than 2 miles from the property, including a severely disadvantaged community that is immediately adjacent to the property, resulting from the heavy industrial use in this area. Next slide. So you can see on this slide that there are existing access roads that crisscross the property, both up on the mesa and in the lower wetlands areas. So many of these roads will be decommissioned and restored to natural habitat, but you can imagine that some of these roads could become part of a trail network for the public to access this property. And the flat conditions on the mesa could offer the opportunity for ADA compliant trails with stunning ocean views. Next slide. A small portion of the site could potentially be a site for low impact, lower cost overnight accommodations. This site is on the bluff overlooking Pacific Coast Highway with a panoramic view of the ocean. There is a lot of planning that needs to be done to decide how the Banny Ranch site will be restored and managed, and what the public access will look like in the years to come. MRCA will embark on a public planning process with nearby communities and tribes after the acquisition is complete. And we hope to recommend funding to help support MRCA in this planning process, hopefully in the fall. In addition, this project will protect significant cultural resources and important lands for Native nations. Documented evidence shows that Indigenous people inhabited this area, currently known as Banny Ranch, for at least 6,000 years. The Banny Ranch site, in addition to the adjacent Fairview Park and other bluff areas near the Santa Ana River, are part of a well-documented cultural corridor of significant villages, cultural spaces, and sacred sites known as Ymca. The site is important to the Hachman Waneno, Tongva, Gabrielino Shoshone, and Gabrielino Keech tribal nations. Tribal leaders and community members have asked for full, fair, and equitable representation on decision-making bodies regarding the long-term management of this site. Tribes have also expressed interest in potentially pursuing future acquisition of a portion of the site. Acquisition of Banny Ranch will support tribal access and use of the property for California Native American people and tribes. The Trust for Public Land, MRCA, and the funding agencies are engaging with tribes to plan for tribal access to the property and involve the tribes in management of the site. Tribal engagement began formally with letters that we sent to tribal governments in July of 2021. Our only government-to-government consultation was with the Hachman Band of Waneno Indians on August 26, 2021, at which the tribes shared their desire to share the power of management decision-making at the site. We also had a site visit at Banny Ranch with many tribal members from the Hachman Waneno, Tongva Gabrielino Shoshone nations on April 12, 2022 with the funding agencies. Coastal Conservancy staff is working with the tribes, the Resources Agency, and MRCA to include language in our grant agreement and deed restriction to ensure tribal access to the site and participation in management decisions. I think I have one more slide. Oh, that's it. So with that, I thank you. And now I would like to introduce Paolo Peroni from the Trust for Public Land, who would like to say a few words. And we also have Elena Egger from MRCA on the line to help answer questions if needed.
First of all, thank you, Chair Bosco, and thank you, members of the Coastal Conservancy Board. I want to start out by recognizing that we wouldn't be here today without the incredible generosity of Frank and Joanne Randall, who provided a $50 million donation to the acquisition of this property. So I just want to start there. I next want to thank local elected officials, in particular Assemblywoman Kati Petrie-Norris, who from the start, before she was even sworn in, was a supporter of this project, along with Supervisor Katrina Foley, Councilwoman Arliss Reynolds. They were there from day one. I would also like to thank MRCA for their indefatigable efforts on this project. Mr. Edmiston, Council Maloney, and staff, Elena Egger and Mario Sandoval, have just been outstanding partners on this. And then I want to thank Mary, Meg, and Joel, and the rest of the Coastal Conservancy staff for just being incredible advocates for public access and tribal engagement on this property, as well as the tribal leaders that joined us on the property last month. And then I'm just here to answer any questions. If there's any questions you may have about the project, just really appreciate the consideration today. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any board comments, questions? Banny?
I just wanted to give you a chance to mentioned, so you're requesting a different amount of money than was in the original. You want to give us any background on that?
Thank you.
Yeah, the Trust for Public Land applied for a Section 6 grant from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for $11 million. There is currently some discussion going on about whether or not we will be able to secure those funds, mostly related to the balance between protecting endangered species and allowing for public access, and potentially allowing for some lower cost coastal accommodations on the site. So TPL is currently working with Fish and Wildlife Service and the Department of Fish and Wildlife to figure out if that funding will come through. So we increased the maximum amount that the board would approve today. In case that grant doesn't come through, then we will be able to help fund half of that $11 million gap, along with WCB is also adding $5.5 million to their authorization.
Ms. Cooper, if I could just follow up on that briefly. So is the idea that the funding will be up to the amount of 11.5, not necessarily to include that amount, but up to in the case that some of these other funding sources fall through?
That's right.
Okay.
Yes, thank you for clarifying.
Thank you.
With the understanding that affordable public accommodations is going to be part of the project? Or this funding strategy allows for that to happen?
Correct. It's still
That's
possible.
important.
Yeah, it's still possible that the Fish and Wildlife Service will ultimately be able to allow some lower cost coastal accommodations, but they are just in the middle of figuring that out right now. So if they are able to do that and still provide funding, then we would be able to, of course, lower the amount that the Conservancy was contributing to the acquisition. But we wanted to maintain the option to have lower cost coastal accommodations and to go through the planning exercises and the permitting exercises to.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think that's important. So if the funding strategy doesn't allow that, then the state funding will. Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
may I?
Mr. Aliotto.
I do have a couple of questions, Ms. Cooper, about some of the language of the resolution. But before I get to that, I do, and I'm assuming, and I'm hopeful at least, that we'll be able to hear from some representatives of the various tribes that you mentioned, and API perhaps specifically. But before we do any of that, I just want to stop and congratulate everybody who's been involved in this project. I mean, this is absolutely outstanding effort. It is such a wonderful piece of land, and to see this project come to fruition, I don't think anybody has any issues whatsoever. So before any of that, I just want to say thank you to you specifically for spearheading this, and to the folks at TPL and to MRCA for all of their efforts on this project. Like I said, I do want to hear from somebody from API about this, but could you just briefly go through what some of the discussions have been with respect to co-management of the tribes with this particular space, and how you envision that? Is there going to be, I know there's some discussion about talking to the various tribal interests in ensuring their access to these ancestral lands, but has there been any concrete discussions about their participation as co-managers of this property?
The concrete discussions have been through the discussions around the language of our deed restrictions. So what we are requiring of our grantee to include in their management of the property, which does include the language in the resolution. So in other words, and it goes farther than that to require our grantee to provide a tribal access and management plan that has been co-developed with tribes within, I think it's 3 years of closing, yeah, within 3 years of closing the acquisition. So we are trying to ensure that there is a process in which tribes are sharing management decisions with respect to how the tribes will access the site and use the site and protect the cultural resources of the site.
And is there any way that we can ensure that now, as opposed to keeping merely the possibility of co-management open? Is there a way to ensure co-management at this early stage now? I think you mentioned it's a deed restriction.
Yes, that's the right. So those are the,
okay,
of course, the restrictions that are placed on the property and lay out the uses that are allowed, and also, in this case, the criteria that are required for management planning. We didn't go so far as to use the word co-management because there are many different interpretations of what that might look like, and we really wanted the tribes to participate in the decision-making of what that would look like for them, because there really wasn't the opportunity to do that before closing.
Okay.
That was our intention with including that in the resolution and the grant agreement and the deed restriction language.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I just, I might have a couple other questions after we hear from somebody from the tribes, but thank you again for your effort.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to add a little bit onto what Mr. Alioto said, and that is to call out Joe Edmiston, who worked on this. We've worked with Joe over the years on many projects, and it's good to hear that he had his hand in this one, because he certainly does an awfully good job with his group. Is Rico Mastrodonato here? Oh, yeah, would you like to speak, or?
No, I conceded my comments to Paolo.
Oh, I see, okay.
Thank you for the effort.
Should we do the public comment?
Yeah, now we'll do the public comments. Do we have any public comments?
Yes, we have 7 public comments right now.
7, all right.
First speaker is a call-in with no number.
Okay, let me remind everyone that with 7, we can do 2 minutes a person. So we'll do that, 2 minutes.
Okay. All right, first speaker, you can talk now. Hello, call-in user, are you there? They're muted right now.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello, go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you, all the esteemed members. I'm just a citizen in California, and a lot of us are trying to do our best to protect nature, wildlife, and what little we have left. And generally, we'd like to also see that some of our natural resources are also left alone and not be exploited with rails and trails and humans in those areas. I mean, I'd just like to keep that thought in mind too for all the various projects. I wasn't able to speak on that on item 7, but having railroads going through areas, I mean, is there a different theory of thought here sometimes that we should just preserve and conserve nature? And I'd like folks to also reconsider that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next person.
Okay, next speaker is Supervisor Katrina Foley. You can speak now.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Katrina Foley, your Orange County Supervisor here in Orange County. I want to thank you all for considering this item today. It is so important. You have so many great historic projects before you today. So congratulations on behalf of California. I want to express my strong support for the up to $11.5 million ask towards the Banning Ranch acquisition. This is a unique moment in time for not just Orange County, but all of California to protect 384 acres of coastal open space. as a local school board member, city council member, and mayor of the city council and of Costa Mesa, and now Orange County supervisor, I know all of the hard work that our community has put in over the years to protect this space and to be able to have it as a coastal regional open space park. This is just incredible that we are on the verge of making this dream come true. I want to just share to you how important this is for the socioeconomically disadvantaged communities that are adjacent to the park and nearby the park in Costa Mesa, Huntington Beach, and Santa Ana. The Santa Ana River Trail provides direct access. So I see a future where kids can ride their bikes and parents can stroll down the Santa Ana River Trail. They can come to this beautiful space. They can access the tribal, ancestral cultural resources, the wetlands, all of the nature, and they can have beautiful views to make their lives better. So I encourage you strongly to support this item. It's a unique moment in time for not only Orange County, like I said, but all of California. This is the last largest private natural area along the Southern California coast to preserve for decades to come. And this acquisition also will comply with our 30 by 30 conservation, equity, and access goals for the state of California. As Orange County Supervisor, it's really important to our community here that you approve this grant. And I thank you for your consideration. And I thank all of those who've been involved over the years, the volunteers, the community activists, of course, the Randalls, and the state and federal partners to help make this come to fruition. So thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you, Supervisor Foley. Okay, the next speaker, please.
Okay, next speaker is Gabrielle Crow.
Miha, and good morning, everyone. Honorable Governing Board, as well as the Coastal Conservancy staff, and as well as everybody else joining us this morning. I'm the Vice Chair for the Gabrielina Shoshone Tribal Council of Southern California. I'm actually joining you here from Kumeyaay land. I live in North County, San Diego. I just wanted to come on this call today to just tell you my support for the acquisition of the Banny Ranch area. I actually had, I think it's an incredible opportunity for tribal members to actually co-manage the land. I was actually there on the site visit last month with my daughter, and it was a very unique experience to be able to see and kind of picture what the property used to look like before. And I think that with your support that we can actually have an incredible future here working with tribal members. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Jessa Calderon.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mi'iha Commissioners, Natanya Ned, Jessica Calderon. I am Tongva and Chumash, and I am with Sacred Places Institute. As you know, Sacred Places Institute has sent in a comment via email as we have several recommendations regarding the language of the proposed resolution and findings as articulated in the staff recommendation report prepared for today's meeting. Our general comments are that we support the acquisition of the traditional village of Ymca, now known as Banny Ranch property, for the purposes of protecting the site in perpetuity for conservation purposes, so long as the Tongva and Ahachiman nations and tribal community members have equal representation on any and all decision-making bodies for the land, and so long as tribal rights to access and use these tribal lands for cultural purposes are protected in perpetuity, but also not limiting tribal involvement to traditional cultural use. We need assurances that tribal concerns are being documented and taken seriously by the Conservancy, all other state funders of the land purchase, and future title holders. So far, we have been on the same level as the general public. For instance, we didn't get access to seeing the deed till last week. But we would also like to thank the Conservancy for funding to support our land rematriation work. We're glad that this will be protected, and we just want to make sure that our communities are empowered to be leaders regarding future stewardship of our land. So thank you all for everything that you are doing. I
greatly appreciate it, and I would like to end it by saying Awesh Koneha. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next speaker, please.
Yeah, next speaker is Marcia Hanscom.
Thank you, Honorable Governing Board. Marcia Hanscom, Wetlands and Coastal Advocate. In about 2003, at a small cafe, I met for breakfast in Sunset Beach on the North Orange County coast with Reed Holderman, who at that time worked for the State Coastal Conservancy. Sorry, that's 1993. As someone who came from the business community, jumping into work to protect some of our last imperiled coastal wetlands in Southern California, I thought the State Coastal Conservancy was a possibility to help us find acquisition money for the Bolsa Chica wetlands. He told me then, Marcia, you know, I admire your vision, but there is no way the state will be paying exorbitant amounts of money that is needed for expensive real estate in Southern California. Our committee, however, was undeterred. One of the Sierra Club members on that committee at Bolsa Chica went on to be inspired to start the Banning Ranch Conservancy, Dr. Terry Welsh, and I couldn't be more proud to support Dr. Welsh's work via support for public acquisition of this land for the coastal lands at the mouth of the Santa Ana River, that is Banning Ranch. As a public speaker did point out earlier, even when bureaucrats and elected officials say there's no way to do things, members of the public can come together to support things like Proposition 12 in 2000, the first really big funding of public lands and parks in many years, and this allowed the State Coastal Conservancy to continue its work to have funding for many other acquisitions. And the public showed up at Coastal Commission meetings for Banning Ranch, seeking denials of development projects on this site. And the public also sought additional private donations. So I want to echo the expression of gratitude to Frank and Joanne Randall for their significant gift to the public through their donation. And later, by the way, after we did acquire 880 acres of land at Bolsa Chica, finding the funding in some other creative ways, and Reed Holderman went on to work for the Trust for Public Land, he did help with the assistance of the State Coastal Conservancy to fund the highest amount of money for public acquisition ever in this state at the Ballona Wetlands. So the full circle story I'm telling you now has taken 30 years. And I'm hopeful that people here on the Coastal Conservancy Board, such as my Senator Ben Allen, who's in the legislature, think about moving much faster than the 30 years it's taken to acquire some of these pearls of coastal wetlands in Southern California, and support Governor Newsom's 30 by 30 goals to protect more land now, to acquire more public land, to encourage the emergence of more willing sellers, to leave the carbon in the soil and the vegetation
That's
of these
over
important
2
lands
minutes,
in
Ms.
furtherance of our state's climate change goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hanson. All right, the next speaker, please.
The next speaker is Helen Chaffin.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm just attending as a substitute for Marie Jones, Jug Handle Creek Farm and Nature Center, which was item H on the consent calendar. And I just wanted to let you know that she's a planning commissioner, and there was a planning commission meeting this morning, so she couldn't attend. We want to thank the Conservancy for all the support they have given us, which has enabled us to increase the visitors served every year from maybe 2,500 people to now over 17,000 people. And thank you for all of your support. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next speaker.
Next speaker is Angela Mooney DRC.
Ms. D'Arson, are you there?
Mute everyone. Hi, sorry, I was talking. I didn't realize I was on mute. I'm calling in from unceded Ohlone homelands right now. I'm at a conference in San Francisco. Thank you for this opportunity. I wanted to first just acknowledge that today is the day of action and awareness around missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And I think that's relevant to this conversation because of the link between extractive industries and violence against Indigenous women and girls. We have in our ancestral homelands, I'm a Hashimim, and I'm the executive director and founder of Sacred Places Institute for Indigenous Peoples. The site called Banny Ranch, also known as Ganga, is in shared ancestral homelands of the Tongva and Hashimim people. And it is where much extractive industry has taken place. So I think it's important to acknowledge, this Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Day. I want to thank the Conservancy and everyone else for all of the efforts to protect our ancestral lands. However, as our comment letter indicates, Sacred Places Institute does have some serious concerns. One which I want to specifically uplift. I am a member of the Waninu Band of Mission Indians, the Hashimim Nation, under Chairman Ballardis. And, we're asked to believe that these entities have engaged in a good faith effort to engage in tribe. However, when an official government to government consultation is not even recorded or acknowledged and those comments are not included in the staff report, that's a problem. Again, I want to underscore that we absolutely support the purchase of this land. However, we also have some serious concerns about what's happened in terms of tribal engagement so far. It's been incredibly challenging to get access to information and to get access to the site. We're grateful that we were able to access the site in April. However, Sacred Places Institute had been demanding tribal access to the site since December. And we raise these issues not to mar the good work that's happening here, but we raise these issues because if folks are really seriously considering justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, if folks are really taking seriously Governor Newsom's pledge to support tribal land rematriation, then state agencies, particularly those that are utilizing state funds to fund acquisition of lands in our homelands, need to do better in terms of tribal engagement. I want to name too that in shared Hashimim and Tongva homelands, this is, as far as we're aware, the only site remaining open space that's within the confluence of Wanawanicha, the Santa Ana River, and the ocean. I also want to name, I had to join the meeting late because as I said, I was at another meeting, but I also want to name that nearly every tribal community member who spoke at the meeting that Sacred Places Institute was instrumental in helping orchestrate and coordinate for these agencies and Trust for Public Land, nearly every single one of the attendees, including tribal leaders, at that meeting specifically articulated land rematriation and land acquisition as a goal. And so it's great that MRCA is willing to take on this land, but it's important for us that you understand and that part of the public record is that tribal communities are calling for actual land rematriation. The final thing that I want to name here is this conversation around affordable overnight access and accommodations. That is absolutely something that cannot occur absent additional substantive and prolonged conversations with tribal community members. There are well-documented cultural landscapes and cultural sites on the property, and in no way, shape, or form is it acceptable for anyone else to decide where or if overnight accommodations are going to happen until those meaningful conversations have happened with tribes. Another thing that tribes called for at the site visit was a substantive ethnographic review, so that as much as you all care about the endangered species, we can also have a more substantive understanding of this site as a cultural site. So again, I thank you for your time. I thank you for these efforts, and we strongly encourage you to adopt the amendments and proposed language changes that SPI has recommended in terms of the resolution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other speakers?
Yes, next speaker is Councilmember Arliss Reynolds.
Hi, good morning. I'm Arliss Reynolds, Costa Mesa City Council member representing the district in Costa Mesa adjacent to Banning Ranch and one of two West Side districts that are home to our city's disadvantaged community and Park 4 neighborhoods. This fight to save Banning Ranch and to return the land to public use, coastal habitat, and sacred space is a deep passion of mine and deeply personal, because it was this fight and this dream that really propelled me into public service. When, oh, I'm getting a note that I'm sideways here. When I joined this fight 10 years ago, I'll try to fix that. I realized many voices in my community were missing from that fight about 10 years ago. I began organizing at the grassroots level, door to door, to engage young people, our Latino leaders, and everyday residents to help galvanize broad community support to save Banning Ranch. We also worked closely with leaders of the Tongva and Hashimid nations to help uplift their voices about the history and importance of this land and support the comments we've heard from tribes today. It was during this work that I convinced both myself and community members that our voices make a difference. So I see this opportunity to save Banning Ranch as both supporting a community dream, but also showing that local activism and broad community engagement really works. It's also through this work that I became an elected representative, and I have carried our community goals for open space and access to nature into our council work. Costa Mesa City Council has placed efforts to increase park space and access to parks among our top strategic goals. So we are active and invested partners in this effort as a city. A park and preserve at Banning Ranch would be a game changer for our goals, especially for our families who live in mixed use industrial areas with limited park access currently. I'm so grateful for all of the advocates, the private donors, the state agencies that have brought us so close to the finish line here. Please join us and approve funding for the acquisition of Banning Ranch as public park and preserve, serving our public in perpetuity. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member.
Okay, next speaker is Manuel Chavez.
Mr. Chavez, are you there?
Yes, apologies for the setup. I'm Manuel Chavez, councilmember in District 4 in Costa Mesa. Artist Reynolds hugs my district in a nutshell. I'm here today to really advocate for this open space to be available for people in my district and her district. We both cover the most Hispanic portion of Costa Mesa, which is also the most marginalized portion of Costa Mesa. We have the most Title I schools and the most lacking in terms of park access. This Banning Ranch acquisition will really allow our community the chance to thrive and have equal opportunities that others have in the city of Costa Mesa. Along the way, this is very crucial for us as we're trying to prepare for climate change. As we know, having more tree canopies, having more access to open space, having more things of this nature really ensures that not only will our students and young people learn to appreciate more of the environment, but also give them spaces where they have natural cooling centers with more natural vegetation. I really advocate and hope you guys will consider the full funding of $11.5 million. I promise you not only change the lives of people in Costa Mesa, but also the lives of those lower income folks in Huntington Beach and Santa Ana. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Terry Welsh. Terry, you can speak now. All right, they're not coming through. We move on to the next speaker. Next is Patricia Mcpherson.
Am I on? Hi, this
You're
is Patricia Mcpherson, Grassroots Coalition. I again also wish to see this approved. I did not hear a name come up, Steve Ray. I have been going to Coastal Commission meetings for the past 30 years and stood shoulder to shoulder with Steve Ray, who was the executive director of the Conservancy. And I just wanted to raise his name and his tireless efforts for promoting the acquisition, and thanks so very much to the Randalls for their incredible donation to actually kick this off and see this through. I cannot thank you enough, and I also just want to say that for Steve Ray, his sentiments that he wanted to ensure that what has happened at Bayona does not happen to Banning Ranch for its restoration. And I echo that and cede the rest of my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we have two more speakers. Next one is Gabrielle Lasas.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Awesome. Sorry if you hear wind, I'm outside today. So I'm Gabriela Lashes. I work with Sacred Places Institute for Indigenous Peoples. I just wanted to take this time to sort of, my apologies, my notes disappeared. I just wanted to sort of take this time to thank the Conservancy for possibly funding support for the land remediation work, and that we're glad to that Banning Ranch and Ganga will be protected. We want to make sure that our communities are empowered to be leaders regarding the future stewardship of our homelands. I failed to mention that I am a Tongva tribal member, so this is very near and dear to my heart. I think just to add on, tribes want land back. That is what tribes want. And it's not land back in the sense, oh, nobody can access it. It's land back in the way that we can access land and practice traditions in ways that we haven't been able to for hundreds of years. Tribes want equitable participation in any and all leadership and decision-making bodies for the land. That was shared by both my colleagues, Jessa and Angela. That tribes just want to be included in the conversation and not in a way where it's like performative. It has to be a meaningful co-management discussion. Like stated before, don't limit tribal involvement to cultural use. Tribal involvement should be, we as tribal entities are not the general public, if that makes sense. We're sovereign nations with our own governing boards. So being treated with the respect of other governing organizations is really impactful. So in areas where we're trying to work and do stuff in regards to that, being treated as, or being stated as like, oh, you do things with the general public is really showing and off-putting in terms of that. And then I guess just we need reassurances that tribal concerns are being documented and taken seriously. Yeah, and I think just to uplift what my colleagues had said, all of this is really important. We're super excited to see the land like be protected and saved. But it's also really important that tribal voices are heard, because the case has been not the best in recent days. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next speaker is Banning Ranch Conservancy.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. My name is Melanie Schlotterbeck. I'm the Executive Director of Banning Ranch Conservancy. Our board president, Terry Welsh, was, for whatever reason, unable to unmute, so I will be reading his speech. It starts, it is a real honor to speak before the California Coastal Conservancy. For the last 23 years, we have met monthly to discuss, research, strategize, and organize for the preservation of Banning Ranch. We've partnered with local tribes and a wide range of groups and individuals to challenge the proposed development of the property. The case was taken all the way up to the state Supreme Court and won. Through dedication, perseverance, and tenacity, we are at the verge of preserving this important property, and it's hard to believe that this moment has arrived. As president, he has had a unique perspective, a front row seat to watch this effort grow through the years. And we both can tell you that we are amazed at the number of people who care about Banning Ranch, inspired by their passion, and humbled by the amount of work they have done. It is truly impressive. Terry has been at this a long, long time. In fact, when he started, he was not yet a father. In 2 weeks, his daughter will graduate college. Which leads me to the final point that this will be a multi-generational effort with much work to be done by leaders yet to come. To be ready ourselves, we've hired a community engagement coordinator to help us through the next phase for the property. But if this current assemblage and coalition of Banning Ranch supporters is any indication, we have nothing but confidence for the future. This is a coalition that is deep and wide, can move mountains, and is determined to see that Banning Ranch is one of the all-time great success stories for Southern California's coastal parks. We respectfully ask that you approve the grant to TPL and save Banning Ranch. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, there are no more public comments.
What did he say?
I think he said there's no more.
All right, what we're going to do now is I think Senator Mcguire is on Zoom, so I think we'll go to him and then come back to this item when we're finished with that. So how do we get Senator Mcguire?
Good morning, Congressman.
Oh, there he is.
Hey, a little creepy as I pop up behind you. It's super smooth, Congressman. It's good to see you. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, board members, senators, and assembly members. I'm really honored to be with you today. Thank you so much for allowing me to be able to attend your meeting. I wanted to be able to speak on the Great Redwood Trail today, and I want to first say thank you to the chairperson, to the amazing board, and the incredible staff of the Coastal Conservancy for stepping up and moving this project forward. The action that has been in front of you today is truly historic. It's historic for the entire state of California. It's historic for the North Coast region. And today is truly a day for celebration. It's a celebration that we have finally dissolved a dysfunctional public agency, and that is behind us, the dissolution of the North Coast Railroad Authority. And it's a celebration today that we're on the verge of formally launching a legacy project that will benefit generations of Californians and outdoor recreational enthusiasts from across the planet. And this celebration is all about what will become the longest rail trail in America, the Great Redwood Trail. Now, back in 2017, Mr. Chair, when we first started exploring the transition of the NCRA Railroad to the Great Redwood Trail, we quickly came to the conclusion that the Coastal Conservancy, was absolutely the best organization to move this project forward. And we've never wavered from that. And I want to say thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your leadership, for your board's leadership, and your amazing staff for the outstanding hard work and perseverance to get to this damn agenda item today. It has been a long time coming and a tad complicated. And Karen Gear can now stop swearing. Well, maybe she's going to keep swearing here. There is no doubt that the Great Redwood Trail is going to become nationally iconic. There is no other trail system in America that boasts the beauty, the diverse landscapes, the historic forests, and historic communities than what we have on the Great Redwood Trail. And the trail is also going to be a game changer for the North Coast region, which is one of the most impoverished in the state. It's quickly going to become a landmark, world-class hiking, biking, and riding trail. And as what we know, it's also going to be an economic driver for the North Coast. Outdoor recreation was worth $93 billion prior to the pandemic, and it's quickly coming back. The trail is going to traverse through some of the most spectacular landscapes on Earth, including ancient redwoods and state parks and national forests, through golden oak-studded hills and lush vineyards, and along the shores of the Eel and Russian rivers. And the Great Redwood Trail is actually a reality even as we speak. Cities from San Rafael and Petaluma, Healdsburg, Ukiah, Fortuna, Eureka, Arcata, and everywhere in between has already installed portions of the trail, and many others are moving forward to build additional sections even as we speak today. But of course, bigger opportunities are yet to come. And we can't say how much we are looking forward. We're looking forward to working with you and your staff to enlist residents and neighbors from across the region to take part in the master planning process in the coming months and be part of this historic opportunity to help create the longest rail trail in America. I'm going to wrap up right here, Mr. Chair, and I'm sorry for going on. I'm pretty excited about this. And I'll just say this. Are there going to be challenges? Hell yes, there are. It goes without saying for a project this consequential. But we have the right team and the budget to get that on. And the team is being led by the Coastal Conservancy. This state, California, is stronger because of the work that you do as a board and your Coastal Conservancy staff. And I've always said from the very beginning, the process is not going to be fast, but we're going to do it right. And we know it is incredibly competent hands that will be leading us with the Conservancy in the lead. The best is yet to come, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for allowing me a brief moment to be able to speak with you and to be able to offer sincere thanks to you and to your entire team.
Well, thank you, Senator Mcguire. Let me say on behalf of the board how proud we are that you selected us to be a major part of this project. And in return for that, I want to say from deep in my heart that I know as a fact that this wouldn't have happened without you. It was your idea, it is your energy, it is your pushing it through many, many obstacles. And although we think of the trail as something that will benefit people once it's completed, it will benefit people while it's being completed as well, because many, many fine people of all walks of life will be able to work on this trail and see it accomplished, who knows how many years from now, but the process itself will be a wonderful thing. And all of this we owe to you, and thank you very much.
Congressman, thank you so much for that. It's been a team effort 100% of the way. I also want to say thank you to Jason Lyles, who we're honored to be able to work with in our office each and every day. He has been working his tail off to be able to get this done. But truly, Mr. Chair, this would not have happened without the Coastal Conservancy and the partnership with the legislature and the governor's office. And we're truly grateful.
Thank you. Are there any comments from the board? Mr. Alioto?
Is this regarding Senator Mcguire's statements? No, but regarding the item on the agenda, yes. I will say, Senator, I did appreciate your willingness to use colorful language. You and I are kindred spirits in that regard.
Thank you, Mr. Alioto. I learned it all from Bosco.
There you go.
All right, well, thank you, Senator Mcguire. And again, we appreciate everything that you've done.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good to be with you, board. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, we'll go back to item 8 now. And Mr. Alioto, do you want to begin our?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts here. I'm going to go back to what I said in the beginning, and I'll just reiterate how important I think this project is to not just the people in that area, not just to the tribal interests, but to the people of California. And again, I want to congratulate everybody who's played any role whatsoever in making this project happen. Nobody is opposed to the project. There's not going to be a person here that votes against it, I can't imagine. I just think we have a little bit of housekeeping to do with respect to some of the important responsibilities that we have as a conservancy. And where I guess I would start is just a quick reference to the project selection criteria that we've adopted as a board. And that project selection criteria, when we vote on this resolution, we are finding in effect that the proposed project is consistent with those criteria. That's what our responsibility is. And what do those criteria say? Number 3, the third criterion is that the project includes a serious effort to engage tribes. And what that means in the bullet points that are enumerated under that specific criterion is that we, quote, work with tribes to enable traditional stewardship and cultural practices on ancestral land and co-management of their ancestral lands and natural resources, end of quote. Another bullet under that criterion requires that we assist tribes to regain access to their ancestral lands on the coast. So if we are voting on the resolution, we need to ensure that they follow along with those project selection criteria. Now, I'm going to say there's no question to me, because you've represented it, and I have no doubt that you have been, and Ms. Cooper, you said you have been, and we continue to work with tribes in the management and the access to this particularly important facility. But I think their objection appears to be, at least to me, twofold. Number one, that their co-management or their place in the decision making has not been specifically enumerated within this resolution. It seems to be number one. And number two, that they don't want to have any conflict with their access and with the and with the creation of low-cost coastal accommodations. Okay, so those are the two things. If it's okay with everybody, I just want to briefly give my thoughts on how we can resolve this issue. Before I do that, I want to say that I have Ms. Mooney Darcy, who was kind enough to come on and make some statements. She issued a letter that I have here in front of me from May 4th. There are a number of comments in this letter that I think are important. Some of the comments request changes in the way that the project, the way that the staff wrote the recommendation. I am not going to address those specifically because the staff recommendation is one thing. It's, I think, internal, and obviously it's been publicized, but that would not be necessarily on the record. I think the resolution, however, the amendments to a resolution are things that I do want to address specifically. That said, they make some pretty decent requests, and so I'm just going to ask folks on the staff in the future to be sensitive to some of the requests that they've made in this letter, including, for example, the capitalization of the word Indigenous and the capitalization of the word Native. They objected to being grouped together as the, quote, Indigenous community, as opposed to having each of their specific tribes enumerated. There are things like that, I think, that are respectful for them. And so I would ask, to the extent possible in your follow-on recommendations, to do your best to accommodate them. They did, so I'm going to turn then to the resolution. I'm going to start with the second point, which is the resolution amendments that they've requested really go to the purpose of what this project is. And one of the purposes of the project is to provide potential lower cost coastal accommodations. And they wrote, they seek to amend that to say, so long as that proposed low cost accommodation does not conflict with or impair tribal access. I didn't frankly understand what that, I did not understand what that meant the first time I read it, but Ms. Mooney Darcy, I think, clarified it. And it sounds to me like they don't want homes built on their ancient Genga grounds, on their ancestral grounds. I don't think anybody is going to have an objection to not doing that. At least that sounded like what the objection was to me. They want to ensure that we are not building low-cost hotel rooms or accommodations of any sort on land that they consider to be ancestrally important. And I agree with them. I don't think we should do that. How do we go about doing that? I think we go about doing that by making sure that they are playing a role in the decision-making of how this is planned and in the decision-making of how the property is ultimately managed. So that's number one. Number two, the other thing they said is the cultural resource protection, and they wanted to name the specific tribes, Hakaman, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and the Tongva access. The only problem with enumerating the names of the tribes specifically is that you risk maybe excluding one by accident. They may have done that themselves. I don't know if this is true or not, but later in the amendment, they request for, with a special access for the Gabrielino Shoshone, which Ms. Crow was kind enough to speak about. And that is, then the Gabrielino Shoshone is not enumerated in the first. Okay, that just creates a big problem. So how do we address the idea of paying them the respect due by not grouping them together as, quote, Indigenous community, but at the same time making sure that we include all of the tribes? I don't know. I don't know all of the specific tribes that are included in this. So maybe I would suggest that we consider how we would do that. So I think that we have a way through this, which is to enumerate in the resolution that it is our understanding, and I think I would say that I want to, in order to vote on this, approve this, I want it to be clear that the project criterion are being followed, which is to include a serious effort to engage the tribes, and that means to work with them for not only their access, but also potentially co-management. I don't know how to word this. I think it's a relatively simple thing that we can do to amend it. If anybody has any recommendations, I would love to hear it. Perhaps maybe one thing we could do is come back to this after the break if we have a chance to maybe rewrite it or add some language that we think would be appropriate. But that would be my suggestion moving forward. Perhaps folks could tell me if I'm completely off the wall, or if they agree in spirit with what I'm saying, that would be helpful too.
Are there any other comments?
Well, I appreciate you making the effort to try and figure out how to integrate those comments into the action that we take today. The language that I heard in the oral testimony talked about equal decision-making authority. I don't know how that differs from co-management, but I do think that that concept and that respect of engagement of government to government is key to this. So I guess, is that something that TPL is going to be managing? Is this process, that's up to TPL on how they're going to do it? Or how do we ensure that there is that government to government respect?
That
and
would
engagement?
be managed through MRCA after they acquire the land in the back-to-back escrow from TPL. And, you know, I don't have the language before you in the draft OTD language, but it does address in some detail the level of access and engagement and power sharing that we are asking MRCA to have as part of this tribal management plan that I had said that we're requiring to see within 3 years of closing. So that we're asking MRCA to do through their planning processes, which also include planning for the multiple uses that we have proposed would be part of this acquisition. So potentially, and I just wanted to clarify that the lower cost accommodations that have been talked about is just camping.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but still.
But yeah, it's not a campsites,
Yeah,
you know, right?
not
yes.
a hotel. But you know, the endangered species and the trails and the potential camping. So there are multiple things that will go into that planning process after the acquisition. But that is what we're asking MRCA to include in their planning process. What was the other thing I wanted to clarify? Just as far, and I appreciate the point about enumerating the different tribes, I did wanted to point out that the language that we used here was agreed upon with the Secretary for Tribal Affairs from the Resources Agency. Okay. So we were trying to be inclusive in using that language, but I also understand the point of wanting to list the different tribes. I think there are about 10 tribes on the list from the Native American Heritage Commission that are tribes who have an expressed interest in this area, but
and that obviously
that's a much broader list.
And that creates a huge danger if we enumerate 3 and there's 7 that we haven't. I mean, that, you know, then now we're doing.
Just say including and then enumerate them.
Yeah.
Including but not limited to.
Yeah.
But you also, Ms. Cooper, you said that you ran that language by which authority you said?
That was the Deputy Secretary for Tribal Affairs, Geneva Thompson at the Natural Resources Agency.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she's been working on this with the Coastal Conservancy for quite some time.
Okay.
Perhaps, if I may, Mr. Chairman, perhaps staff could communicate back to Natural Resources the feedback that you've received from the Native groups and see if there's direction there. Perhaps a conversation can occur between the parties to ensure that everybody is copacetic with whatever you know, agreement is made in terms of those references. I just wanted to add 2 more things. One is with respect to that, I'm wondering if our tech people can also get the correct spelling of the tribal names for the
closed caption?
For the closed caption, because it was like Uganda and all kinds of other, you know, confusing words. And I think it's just because the computer was trying to figure out what they were. And I don't know if we can kind of program that. I'm like the last person up here that should even be
we will certainly
saying
look into
this.
that, though. Yeah.
And then with respect to Mr. Alioto's point, I think that perhaps in terms of the tribal co-management, or, you know, whatever that language is, you could specifically include in that, probably as an amendment to this motion, that the issue of building of low cost camping or other structures on sacred land will be specifically addressed. And then that way it gets to your point, Mr. Alioto, that it be called out without a decision being made by us when it's supposed to be a product of the, you know, of your government to government discussions and negotiations. So that's just a suggestion.
how about this as a suggestion? What if we were to table this item and rewrite the resolution after some of the tribal representatives have had a chance to confer with the deputy secretary as well as staff on this, on some of these issues, with the 2 points in mind being that, number one, their co-management, or at least their participation in decision-making and co-management, are enumerated, and that they have an opportunity to, especially making decisions with respect to ancestral lands and whether or not there are any kind of campgrounds placed on or near those lands. So in a way that's general, at the same time, I hate the idea of letting this go another 3 months till our next meeting.
Yeah,
There's a-
Megan,
I'm
can I,
concerned about
I'd like
that,
to
yeah.
speak to that.
I was gonna.
So anticipated close of escrow is June 30th. And we don't have another board meeting scheduled until September.
Okay.
We could potentially call a special board meeting. One thing I would recommend or ask you to consider is including cultural resource protection among the list of purposes of the acquisition. And that would be in the deed restriction. So take those first 3 words that Angela Mooney Darcy added in red.
And make that a separate purpose.
Yeah,
Put
and
it
just
in the
leave
deed
those. So the property acquired under this authorization shall be managed and operated for cultural resource protection, comma, open space protection, wildlife habitat. And I think that makes a very powerful statement, and that would be in the deed restriction, correct?
So yes, the acquisition purposes that are stated in the resolution then flow through to the deed restriction.
Yeah.
Well, perhaps that sounds like that would resolve the issue about the ancestral lands. Is that right? The other issue being, I think, just the enumeration of the tribes. I don't know if Ms. Mooney Darcy is still on the call or if Ms. Crow is, but perhaps, I think our concern with enumerating the tribes is that we don't want to exclude tribes that might want to have access to these special places.
What about the including but not limited to language?
Yeah.
I had a proposed, I don't know, Amy, if you want me to go a bit further on the adding, so agreeing to shall manage and operate for cultural resource protection and tribal access and use of their ancestral homelands for tribes included on but not limited to the tribes listed on the NEHC list of California Native American tribes. So just trying to find a way to get the tribal access and use language in to the resolution as well. That's something of interest to the board, or just leaving for cultural resource protection. But I think that there would be a way to be inclusive in that.
I see Ms. Crow has just come into the screen, which is great. I'm wondering, given what we've been talking about and giving the fact that just with the interest that we don't want to specifically exclude any tribe from access to these areas, are you okay with the language that refers to the tribes collectively as the California Native American tribes, Ms. Crow?
I don't agree with that, only because I feel like it's such a broad term and there's so many, we have so many different tribal groups in the area that we're talking about specifically. And I feel like the ones that are actually working on the projects should be the ones, obviously we don't want to exclude anyone in for access once this project actually goes through. But what I also think about is if we use the broad term California Native American, sometimes Gabrielino Tongva people have issues with some Hashima people being on places that are like, our ancestral village sites. And so I just don't want it to be a problem with intertribal issues. I feel like there's enough issues with tribal members in the Gabrielino Tongva. Like we all go by different names for specific reasons. And so everybody's adamant about being called certain things. So I think that including those groups from that area, specifically of the Hashimam and the Gabrielino different tribes in the area, because I know that there's some that don't even go by Gabrielino Tongva, they go by Tongva specifically. So I think that the people that are involved in the project so far, we had a good site visit and we had a lot of community members there. I think that that's like the place to start with. The Native American Heritage Commission list, I know that my tribal group isn't even on it, so I feel like that's also not the go-to for that. So I don't know. I don't have 100% answers for that, but I think that including everybody that's in that specific area is better than actually just saying California Native tribes, because that's a very broad, open discussion.
And those are the 3 tribes that are listed in Ms. Mooney Darcy's letter: the Tongva Gabrielino, the Gabrielino Shoshone, and the Hachman Juanino.
The Ahashman Juanino, yeah. So those are the people that were actually there on the project. So I know that I think that the Coastal Conservancy has obviously sent out other letters of interest for different tribal groups, and it's just dependent on who wants to be working on the project with the Coastal Conservancy.
Are there representatives of any other tribes that have shown an interest in this area?
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead. No, you're answering.
I think what I would recommend is keeping the language of the deed restriction relatively broad, because it is going to last forever.
Yeah, right.
And what we could do is, operated for cultural resource protection, and I don't know what exactly the right term is, whether that's California Native American tribes or something else, access and use of their ancestral homelands. So have that in there at the beginning. I would not recommend the adding the lower cost coastal accommodation language. It is that is, to not conflict with or impair could be interpreted incredibly broadly and basically prevent any camping on the site.
We have 2 goals. One of them is low-cost accommodations. The other is ancestral access to ancestral homes. Those are both our tasks. We can't necessarily elevate the priority of one over the other. So I agree with that. And your comment about the cultural resource protection would cover that anyway, right?
Yeah. It would be one of the, it would be the very first enumerated objectives of the acquisition.
Ms. Mooney Darcy has her hand up. I think it'd be interesting to hear from her. And then I think my suggestion would be, instead of tabling this till the next meeting, perhaps table it until after lunch. We can come back and work on some wording, if that's okay with people.
We have a lot of attorneys in the room.
Yeah, exactly.
It seems like we're there, right? I think we have wording that's pretty close right now. I don't know if you could suggest something off the top of your head from what's been set up here.
Okay, so there's been a couple ideas floated.
I think your
one
mic
is
is on.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So there've been a couple ideas, and one is to add up front on the acquisition purposes, cultural resource protection. So if you wanted to vote on that, if staff wanted to recommend orally, you could read it into the record, and then you could make a motion to vote on that resolution as amended. I'm not hearing other consensus yet on different language from the board, so I'd like to hear a little bit more discussion and a decision being made if there's other language in addition to that you want added to the resolution.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, one of the issues was including but not limited to, in order to allow a future decision on the appropriate tribal participation. And I really feel like that should be left to the staff and to the MCRA and to the tribes to make that determination in their government to government. So I support the including but not limited in order to provide flexibility and to avoid either some error, which is not including or over including. which is what one of the witnesses said. Second issue for me is to in the, not in the deed, but, or I think maybe you did address this, which was the no building of either camping or low-cost accommodations would occur on sacred lands would be one of the issues that is negotiated in the tribal to tribal, so that the changes that the executive director was suggesting are a broader statement, but then we make it clear in either a resolution further on or just in an amendment to add that that's a specific element. I hope I'm not confusing things. I'm trying to clarify.
I think there's two things before us. One is the language that the staff council just read as would we in the deed, and that the executive officer recommended. So we could take action on that now, right?
Okay, but
and then
I
some
think,
of this other stuff can be worked out.
Well, I think what my understanding was is the executive director had that language, but also.
Right. What we could do is have the changes to the resolution, the adding cultural resource protection at a minimum. We could also add another condition to the grant agreement around, working with the tribes on the planning for the project, and that would be a condition in the grant agreement, but it would not end up in the deed restriction. So I guess what I would recommend at this point, what I would recommend is we could move on to the next two items on the agenda while Megan and Jeanette and I huddle about the additional language of a grant condition, and then come back to that right after the next two items.
I think that's great.
lunch.
If it's okay, before we do that, Ms. Mooney, Darcy has her hand up, and I think it would be worthwhile to hear what she has to say about the discussion.
Yes, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you so much. First, I just want to uplift Councilwoman Crow's comments about the specificity of the tribes that have been involved. I echo her sentiment about concerns around using the broader language California Native American tribe, because it is not, in fact, every California Native American's tribe's ancestral homeland. But I really want to speak to this point about overnight accommodations and clarify something. It's not just that we don't want overnight accommodations built on a sacred site. It's also that if you all are going to take seriously this idea that this site should be able to be used by my community and by Tongva and Gabrielino Shoshone communities for cultural purposes, then you need to be in greater conversation with tribes about what that kind of access means. In other words, we don't want to have the public, be able to be recording with their iPhones ceremonies that we may engage in because you all put a campsite next to where we want our ceremonial grounds to be. And I am one individual of one tribe. I can't make this decision, and neither can anyone in this room. I really want to uplift the principles of free, prior, and informed consent under the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which was adopted by joint resolution in California, I believe 10 years ago. So it is applicable, the standard of free, prior, and informed consent. And what that means is that it's why we suggested amending the language in the resolution. We really believe that this issue of not conflicting uses needs to be named in the resolution, because you all cannot, and neither can I as an individual, neither can any single tribal citizen on this meeting, decide unilaterally what makes sense from a tribal perspective. And so it needs to be named, because our concern, particularly given the challenges and heavy lifting it's required of small grassroots organizations like ours and non-federally recognized tribes that are substantially under-resourced, we are very concerned that if this language is not uplifted in the resolution, we may end up with a campground overlooking where our community members would want to engage in ceremony. That would substantially impair our ability to do so. I'm happy, you know, that you all are considering and thankful that you're considering amending this language, but it's insufficient to say protecting cultural resources, because we're also concerned about what the proximity of overnight camping locations to any ceremonial sites that might be identified would look like. So we're happy to review any proposed language changes, but I just wanted to name those things. Thank you.
Well, I've been uncharacteristically quiet during this whole discussion, and the only reason is that I have a great respect for words, and especially for the process that words get incorporated into things, because we don't oftentimes know what the future application of words is. And I could listen to what Mr. Alioto said and agree with all of it, but in the process of writing that out, I hear the folks from these tribes saying, no, you know, you're not specific enough. You haven't covered this or that. And that's what worries me, because on one hand, we have before us the need to do something now to get this deal done. Now, if you think we can come up with some, I hate to say it, but probably the only words that would be acceptable would be very general. And maybe that isn't what everybody wants, but they would have to be general to not impair things later on, especially for the people that we're trying to benefit from this. You know.
General enough, but not too general. It sounds like there are some local tribes, about 10 of them, that might have some interest in this particular land. And to Ms. Mooney Darcy's point, there might be some tribes in the far reaches of Northern California that simply don't, and including the word California Native tribal nations would include everybody, and maybe that's not appropriate. I think we can craft some language. I think, Mr. Chair, you're correct that language matters and it's important. I do think we should do something about it. I think it makes a lot of sense for us to probably move on to a topic or two while we can work on some of the language on the sidelines.
We could always move on to lunch. That's a good way.
And have it do. Just a quick thought though on what Ms. Mooney Darcy said about cultural resource protection not being sufficient. Look, we do have these two requirements, which is to provide low-cost accommodation. We have a responsibility to do that, and we also have a responsibility to ensure that that ancestral lands are protected. And how do we do that? Well, there certainly is. Without question, there's a way to do this, right? We can do both of these things. We can do this without having a tremendous amount of conflict on it. I just don't want the language to have any appearance, I don't want it to be interpreted later on, 20 years from now or 10 or whatever, that one of these things is more important than the other. They are both equally important based on our enabling legislation. They're both equally important, and they both need to be satisfied. And so we need to figure out a way to do that. I would think that perhaps local California Native American tribes that include the following might be helpful. Something along those lines.
Include, but not limited to.
Including but not limited to would be good. I think it's important that the purposes include, this is a drafting problem at this point. I think we're all in agreement, right? Does it sound like we're all basically have some consensus on what we need to do, and we just need to draft this?
So that there would be, yeah, my understanding is you're going to work on some additional language in the deed restriction, in the deed that is going to probably lean towards the more general, and then with some more, some other language in the grant agreement that would be a little more specific to address
I think it'd be good
local concerns.
I think it'd be good to point out
and
that, go ahead.
Go ahead. I didn't mean local concerns, I meant government to government communications.
I think it's important to point out that post-closing, there's going to be an assessment, right? On archaeological, other sites, and that's what's going to help determine what we do as far as camping and other recreational access opportunities.
Yeah.
And that's
absolutely.
included in the language already, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I briefly mentioned that we do hope to provide some Conservancy funding for that planning process, which we do plan to include that ethnographic survey that Angela mentioned either in the letter or in her comment. So, you know, there's a huge amount of planning that needs to go on at this site. We can't really start that until the acquisition closes. We have tried to start that a little bit, but that really comes as the next phase, where the Conservancy also, staff also helps that the Conservancy will be involved in that and provide funding to be able to, you know, determine how that planning goes and have our requirements for how we want to see the tribal engagement happen and how we want tribes to be involved in that decision-making process. Yeah, there's a lot of environmental analysis, surveys, studies, permits, and things that would need to happen before anything was done on the site.
So what, to emphasize that point, this is not our last chance. This is our opportunity to provide the money for the acquisition, set things up for the planning, but we will be coming back and getting funding for planning. There'll be requirements on that, and that will inform how the site is used in the future.
Right, and I just wanted to put into the record that we've received a lot of verbal and written comments on this, and all of them support moving forward with the acquisition in a timely manner.
Good point.
May I propose we try to draft this over the next couple of items, or maybe after or during lunch? Sound like a plan?
Well, why don't we do this? Let's adjourn for lunch without taking any action on item 8. And when we come back, we'll resume item 8 and see where we are. Great. That makes sense?
Yep.
With an intention to take action.
Yes.
With an intention to take action.
Take a motion on that intention.
Thank you.
All right.
Go ahead, Ann.
You're good.
Tell us where to go.
Well, I'm good when I'm promising lunch.
Yeah.
Item 10, and then go back to item 8 because they're busy working on typing up the language. All right, so item 9 then will be presented by Erica Johnson. Hi, Erica.
Hello. Okay, I will begin. Good afternoon, Chair Bosco, members of the board, and members of the public. My name is Erica Johnson, and today I would like to recommend the Conservancy authorize up to $987,000 to the Port of San Francisco to be reimbursed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Wild Services National Coastal Wetlands Conservation Grant for wetland enhancement and nature-based shoreline adaptations for Heron's Head Park. So Heron's Head Park is a 21.5 acre peninsula that extends out into the San Francisco Bay on the eastern shoreline of San Francisco. Next slide, please. The park is one of few wetlands on the highly urbanized San Francisco waterfront and contains a mosaic of shoreline habitats, which include tidal marsh, mud flats, tidal ponds, rocky intertidal habitat, and various subtidal habitat. Next, please. Together, these shoreline habitats support over 200 migratory and resident birds. It is also home to state and federally listed special status species, which include the North American green sturgeon, the stillhead trout, Chinook salmon, longfin smelt, Ridgeways Rail, and California Sea Blight. Next slide. The combination of wave energy and low supply of suspended sediment from the San Francisco Bay is causing the shoreline and tidal pool edges to erode. In the image you see in front of you, you see the first purple line shows where the shoreline was in 1989, and all the way back to the black dotted line where the projected shoreline will be in 2050 if this project does not take place. The project intends to restore ecological function of the existing shoreline habitat and reinforce the shoreline of the park using nature-based solutions and prevent the loss of habitat. Next slide, please. These nature-based solutions include multiple components. One is 2 acres of coarse material beach to be put in and reduce erosion, and that's in yellow. Another is 1,600 linear feet of living shoreline, which will be constructed by placing large woody debris in the intertidal area to provide high tide refuge for Ridgway's rail and other shoreline birds. The next component is the removal of invasive plants from 7 acres of wetland habitat and planting almost 47,000 native plants, including the endangered California sea blight, to improve habitat quality and adaptation for sea level rise. In the subtidal area, you'll see the blue dots in the image, will be 60 reef balls to be placed to support the settlement of oyster and fish larvae. Once established, the reef balls and oysters will provide protection to the shoreline by reducing the wave energy reaching it. Next slide. A little bit about the project area. It's adjacent to the Bayview and Hunters Point communities. And from the early 1900s to the early 2000s, that shoreline experienced heavy industrial development, such as slaughterhouses, shipyards, and power plants. The residents of the Bayview and Hunters Point communities have suffered from the impacts of industrial pollution and race and class discrimination. The community remains one of the most economically disadvantaged in San Francisco, but has a very long history of community advocacy for environmental justice and access to green space. This park provides access to the San Francisco Bay Trail, an environmental education facility called the Eco Center, wildlife, and is one of the few wetlands in the city that this community has access to. Next slide, please. The port has partnered with the community-based organization called Literacy for Environmental Justice and other community organizations to lead community engagement and workforce development, which will include workshops for regularly scheduled community meetings, educational stewardship days at the park, and job training internships for residents of the communities. With the grant from the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority, some of these project components have already begun. So in this slide, you see a flyer for one of the workshops at Heron's Head Park, and also a article on one of the interns for literacy of for environmental justice working at Heron's Head. Next slide, please. This project leverages support from multiple agencies. Conservancy funds will derive from $1 million grant to the Conservancy from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife National Coastal Wetlands Conservation Grant Program. And the Conservancy will retain $13,000 of that grant for its administrative costs. Other agencies providing financial or in-kind support include San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority, the California Ocean Protection Council, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, Hansen Aggregates, and the port's own funds. This project total comes to $5,788,000. Next slide, please. Thank you for your time. On Zoom today is Carol Bach, the Environmental and Regulatory Affairs Manager for the Port of San Francisco, and we are both happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. Eric, are there any questions, comments? All right, if not.
I just had one question, sorry.
Yes.
Given that this is a peninsula that sticks out into the bay, how is it going to stand up with sea level rise over time, with the bay going up over time?
So the project that is being proposed is supposed to protect that shoreline up until 2050. So it's a 30-year life. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I think also, I don't know if Carol Bach is online. She has anything to add.
Sure, I just unmuted myself. Can you folks hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, as Erica was explaining, the project is designed not only to protect the shoreline from erosion and the size of the material that's going to be placed, the quantity of the material that's going to be placed to construct the living shoreline, and the elevation at which it will be placed are all designed so that that coarse material beach will migrate over time. While it is protecting the shoreline from erosion, it's also going to migrate upward in elevation with rising sea level, continuing to protect the marsh behind it. And that design has an estimated life of 30 years, taking us through mid-century, that it will provide some protection to the marsh through that period of time. But it also sort of buys us time and creates a foundation for subsequent interventions that we might be able to take to extend the life of the peninsula and the marsh. There is a point at which, you know, as sea level rises, that the entire site will be underwater, but this will provide capacity for additional adaptation as well as ecological function until that time.
Great, thank you.
All right, are there any other board comments? Are there any public comments?
There are no public comments.
All right, who would like to move? Mr. Alioto moves.
Mr. Chair, I move to passage of item number 9.
Okay, Mr. Cash, do you want to second that?
Sure.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we approve item 9. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no, and that item is approved. Thank you, Erica.
you.
Good job.
Thank you.
All right, the next project is going to be presented by Shalini Kannan. Is that right, Kannan?
This isn't your first presentation, is it?
No, it's
Okay.
not.
It's a good thing.
Oh, was it her first one? Well, I did ask her a question, so.
Good afternoon, Chair Bosco and members of the board. My name is Shalini Kannan, and I'm here to recommend that the Conservancy authorize disbursement of up to $988,000 of grant funds from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to East Bay Regional Park District to restore wetland and riparian habitat and install interpretive panels on 159 acres of the Coyote Hills Regional Park in the city of Fremont, Alameda County. Staff also recommends adoption of the grantee's CEQA findings. This project leverages 2 investments from the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority for planning in December 2019 and construction in June 2021. Next slide. Coyote Hills Regional Park is well known and loved by the public. The project is an expansion directly eastward of the existing park. The site is adjacent to Eden Landing Ecological Reserve, right north of the project area there, and Don Edward San Francisco Bay National Wildlife Refuge, south of the project area. Once constructed, the project will add to this extensive network of wetlands and open space that provides several ecosystem functions and an important habitat corridor. Next slide. This is one of the few places left around the bay with natural transitions between open water, salt marsh, brackish fresh and seasonal wetlands, grasslands, and upland riparian, willow, and oak forests. The project will enlarge and protect diverse habitats that were historically part of the bay's shore. This will increase plant and animal diversity and provide enhanced areas for upland refugia, overwintering, and a raptor forage. Next slide. The project will take place on areas A and B here in the map, which is 159 acres north and south of Patterson Ranch Road, which is the road in the middle. And the most significant restoration feature of the project is Patterson Slough, which is in Area A. It's that curvy thing. And Patterson Slough is noted in the 2015 Baylands Ecosystem Habitat Goals Science Update for supporting freshwater seasonal wetlands, grasslands, and the largest remaining willow groves in the San Francisco Baylands. Restoring this area will allow for marsh migration upslope as sea level rise causes the water table in this area to rise. Area B and the rest of Area A will be restored based on results of studies conducted around historical ecology and vegetation test plot studies, and they will take into account the present and future soil and drainage conditions in this shoreline habitat. Restoration activities that we'll be funding during construction will include soil import, surface grading to enhance and establish seasonal wetlands, weed management, revegetation via planting and seeding of native plants, and installation of irrigation, buffers, fencing, gates, paths, and interpretive signage. This project is a 159-acre piece of a larger 306-acre park expansion, which also includes areas C and D in this map. And these areas will be improved with other funds. And Area C will preserve 34 acres of organic farmland to be used for public education purposes. And Area D will be a flood control wetland installed by the Alameda County Flood Control and Water Conservation District. East Bay Parks will also construct 11 acres of parking, picnic areas, and trails. Next slide. East Bay Parks plans to begin construction in summer 2022 and will provide long-term operations and maintenance during using their general fund. Funding this project is an opportunity to restore some of the bay's last remaining natural habitat transitions while expanding and improving a popular park for the public. Representatives from East Bay Parks, Chris Barton and Katie Hornbeck, are on the line on Zoom, and them and I would be happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Shalini. Are there questions, comments? Are there any public comments or questions, remarks?
Behind you, Shalini.
This is.
We do have one public comment.
This is Eric Feeler, Chief of Government Affairs for the East Bay Regional Park District. I want to thank you for that fantastic presentation. It was really excellent. And want to thank you all for consideration of this grant. And this is just the perfect coastal resiliency project that's being designed to accommodate sea level rise and also provide some educational opportunities for our public at this beloved park. So thank you for consideration.
Thank you.
Restoration Authority is contributing. It's good to see everybody working better at some of the state regional park district has got skin in the game, so it's good leveraging of state resources.
Are there any other comments?
Yes, we have one public comment from Margot Griswold.
Hello, good afternoon, board and staff. And I want to commend the presentation and the project described for the Coyote Hills. And I think it's great to be paying attention to coastal resiliency, sea level rise, wildlife corridors, freshwater seasonal wetlands, grasslands, and uplands that preserve raptor foraging. And that's my only comment now. I think it's a great project. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Okay, do I hear a motion on this? Okay, been moved and seconded. Who wants to second this? Ann?
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded that we approve item 10. Those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? And the item passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
Next, we will have a present. Should we have Mary's first or item
Let's
8?
go, I think we go back
to
All right.
back to item 8.
We'll go back to item 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go to 11. Oh.
All right.
Sorry.
The winning language is.
Can you pull that up, Andrew?
Thank you. Option 1.
Oh, Andrew's going to pull it up.
Yes,
All right.
because I
Something random off the
Did Andrew write it or?
possibly.
So real quickly, I just wanted to explain what we did. We did revise the purposes of the acquisition language, which is number 3, which was the same number as it was in the resolution originally, which now reads, as you can see on the screen, the property acquired under this authorization will be managed and operated for cultural resource protection, open space protection, wildlife habitat, environmental restoration and conservation, potential lower cost coastal accommodations, and public access, with a special focus on access for California Native American tribal nations and their members whose ancestral homeland includes this site. So you can see that this version does not include enumeration of the names of the tribes themselves, and removed the suggested language about the sort of planning specifics about the potential lower cost coastal accommodations. So in addition to this, what we did was suggest to the board a new condition within the resolution. Could you scroll down to number 4, Andrew? Just right there. And I want to explain that this language came out of, there's a comment in there. This language came out of the draft OTD language that we have been working on with the grantee, which we have also sent to Sacred Places Institute for them to weigh in on. So this says the title holder shall prepare a tribal access and engagement plan that considers the following: access to the real property, cultural resources, natural resources, and cultural sites with minimal protocols, meaningful engagement and involvement in the real property, for example, membership in a management advisory council, potential co-management and ownership of the real property, and other actions identified in dialogue with tribal members whose ancestral homeland includes this site. So this language would also be carried through into the grant agreement. And while we didn't put it into this resolution, there is much more detail in the language that we've developed about what exactly we're asking the grantee to do in regards to tribal access and engagement, as far as the timing, when we want to see the plan, how we would like the engagement to happen. So that is sort of proposal number 1 for the revised resolution language. Oh, and I did want to also mention that this language, the language in number 3, we did get approval from Geneva Thompson, the Secretary for Tribal Affairs. She agreed that in using the more general term to be more inclusive of California Native tribes instead of enumerating those tribes.
But you also did specify there those California Native American tribes who have ancestral lands on this site, right?
Yeah, can you go back up to that, Andrew? Yes.
Okay, and so that would more specifically encompass just the 10 or so tribes that we've been discussing?
Yep.
Was that the deputy secretary's take on that as well?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, that language came from her.
Well, Mr. Alioto, do you want to comment on the language?
Was there going to be, did you say there was two options, Megan?
There is a second option that essentially where we tried to list out the different tribes.
Okay.
We could bring that up. I just want to state on this option that I'm not sure if we have all the names of the tribes correct in this at the moment, because we don't currently have the list. Oh, poor Mary has been our scribe trying to get the correct one over to Andrew. So just when we get to that one, you know, we're not sure that we have all the names correct as they're listed.
Yeah, could I just interrupt? Is that the only change in version 2?
I think, was that the only change in version 2, Mary?
The tribes that are identified in the Sacred Places Institute letter. And then we added one other tribe that we know, Gabrielina Quiche, because we know they're very interested, and it seems like a huge mistake if we're naming tribes to not at
Right.
least name the ones we are aware of their interests.
Well, the only thing I'm concerned about is that we don't want to make a mistake. So I actually think, I don't know, Mr. Alioto, I'm thinking version 1 is more protective because it states the Native American tribes who have an ancestral, have a link with the their ancestral homelands. So that way we know that's according to the agency's tribal liaison, that is the correct reference. So I actually, I like that language because I just don't want us to find ourselves missing somebody or adding a tribe who the other tribes believe does not have that link. I think it should be the subject of discussion among the government to government, and this will cover legally identifying what the important consideration is. That's just my feeling.
I like that language too, and I'll hopefully try to explain why. I understand, first of all, from Ms. Mooney Darcy and also from Ms. Crow, that they want those tribes to be specifically listed. I understand why. I understand that there appears to be at least some issue about whether or not every tribe in the state of California should have access to the site, and I think that I recognize what their interests are. Our concern about enumerating those tribes is that we exclude somebody. I think that we've all said that. Nobody wants to exclude a tribe that might have some legitimate basis to consider these lands to be sacred to that particular tribe. And so I think this is a fair compromise that's general enough to encompass the tribes that have remarked about their interest in this, and at the same time specific enough to address some of the concerns that have been listed or have been at least discussed during the course of the open comment. So I think that part of the language is fine, is good, and it's a good compromise. I am a little bit concerned though about the lack of decision making, and I don't want to get too far down. Well, maybe I do want to get too far. I think that the selection criteria are pretty clear. Serious. Let me see if I can get a language. I think it's serious. The project include a serious effort to engage tribes, and that is specifically defined as allowing for co-management of their ancestral lands and natural resources. Mm-hmm. I'd like to see that language stronger. I think that the language that you proposed.
Can you go down?
Below,
can you scroll down, Andrew?
At number 4.
This new language, as far as the requirement for tribal engagement plan and process, does include mention of potential co-management.
Yeah, meaningful engagement, I think, is not as strong is not strong enough for me. I think it's really important. I think it's really important that these people have a say. I'm not saying that they dictate necessarily what happens, but if there's, I'm envisioning almost a vote where they have a vote in a decision-making somehow in a way that is, meaningful, that actually provides them power to have the final say over how these very important ancestral lands are managed. That's my take. I think that needs to be firm. I think that needs to be in that language that we are in the resolution that we are voting on. That's my opinion on that.
I will just offer that in discussions with the grantee over many months over this language, I believe that they would find that difficult depending on how the language was stated.
Yeah, I think it is both, the grantee and the agency who is going to be owning and managing the land, MRCA. So we could include a requirement for co-management, and it could mean MRCA does not want to be the agency managing the land.
Yeah.
Mr. Aliotti, could I perhaps make a suggestion? I'm wondering if the title holder shall prepare a tribal access and engagement plan that instead of considers, because that seems a little soft, I think that's what you were getting at, perhaps replace that with require the following, and that way all of those elements are required, not considered, but they're required. And that still gives the manager of the grant the flexibility to work those things out with the tribe, because we're not dictating a particular result, but we're saying you shall do all of the following.
That is a very good proposal.
But there again, it has huge legal consequences. Because if this gets to court, a judge would say, well, you don't have discretion here, you have a requirement.
Yeah, and there's actually a lot of conditional language there, not just consider, like Ms. Brownsy noted, but also the potential co-management. What is item 4? I don't see that in the resolution that we're even voting on.
That's a new suggested condition to be added to the resolution.
Is there, of the 401 acres, do you have an idea or a sense of what percentage of that is considered to be sacred or ancestral land? Is it all of it, or is it a portion of it?
I don't feel like I could make a guess at that. If I had to guess, I would say it was all of it. But I don't know. I know there are specifically identified cultural sites. I don't know where they are or how big they are. And the language of this might be a little squishy, but the considers the following was meant to say that this plan and this process will address these following issues, as opposed to saying we will require certain things in regards to each of these issues.
Because this is the first step in the process. Yeah. We're approving the acquisition, and then we have to actually do the plan after that, and to work with all the entities involved to actually produce that plan, so that it's something that not only that they can live with, but also the grantee can live with, who's going to be managing the property. Yeah. I just want to say I'm comfortable with the language as it's written, because it does involve the Native American tribes. It does involve others, the grantee, in working together to create this plan. And it's going to be supervised by the Conservancy too. The Conservancy will be involved all along the way. So I don't have any issues with that.
I think what I'm hearing is that the folks on the board saying that there's some concern about what does meaningful engagement, does that address the concerns that we've heard? And there, the language I've heard is co-management or equal decision-making authority. So that kind of management operating agreement is something that we would expect the grantee to come back to us with a proposal. So at this point, aren't we really trying to say, this is our intent? We want to see this when you come back to us. We're not gonna write it out what it is right now, but it's our intent that you provide something that gets to equal decision-making authority over this property. So I think if we could have that at this stage, but I think it's more than, I just want to be clear. I think we want to see that coming back. It's the intent of the board that we want to see equal decision-making authority come back to us.
I think that's, yeah, and if I could offer that, some of the language that Angela Mooney Darcy said in her letter was tribal leaders and community members have full, fair, and equitable representation on decision-making bodies regarding the long-term management.
Right.
So maybe that to me is more, I like that better than meaningful engagement.
Yeah,
honestly.
I can see that.
Meaningful engagement doesn't say enough to me.
Yes, I think that's I think that's an excellent comment. I think I would also probably, to be honest, be satisfied with this if we just mimic the language of the actual project selection criteria. And it says project includes a, quote, serious effort to engage tribes. And then there are various other statements that go beyond that. But I think if we were to say that the title holder shall prepare a tribal access and engagement plan that, as Ms. Brownie suggested, that requires the following: access to the real property, cultural resources, natural resource, and cultural sites with minimal protocols. And then a serious effort to engage tribes, as that term is used in the project criteria, including membership and management, et cetera. Is anybody following what I'm saying there? Yeah. Because if we use that my problem here, number one, is I want to make sure that these tribes feel like they are participating in lands that are important to them and in the access to them and also in the management of them. But also I feel obligated as a member of this board to do our own duty, which is, when we're voting on these, we are voting on them. And part of that is that we are saying that the proposed project is consistent with the current Conservancy project selection criteria. So I think my solution to that would be, let's add just the language from the project selection criteria, which is what I quoted.
And we're not putting in the full, fair, and equitable.
No, I think that should be included.
Oh.
Okay, can I spitball something? Can somebody maybe comment?
I think Mary's
see
taking
if
it down.
somebody can catch this? The title holder shall prepare a tribal access and engagement plan, quote, plan in paren, that requires the following: access to the real property, cultural resources, natural resources, and cultural sites with minimal protocols. Quote, a serious effort to engage tribes, end of quote, as that term is used in the project selection criteria, including.
Oh, you want me to read it back?
Instead of meaningful?
She had the language instead of meaningful.
Yep.
She has it from the
Full, fair, and equitable.
from the letter. Oh, here, I have it on my phone. Here.
Including the full, fair, and equitable representation on decision-making bodies regarding the long-term management of the site, semicolon. Thank you. And then everything else would stay the same. I get that right? Maybe?
She's still typing.
Okay, Mary, let me try again. I probably blew it. I definitely blew it.
No.
If anybody blew it, it was me and not you. Let's just say that. With minimal protocols, that was all in there, right? No, I know. Okay, I think that's right. Tell me what you think.
Do you want me to read it or have it?
Let me see if I just made any errors. Which
Okay. Real time. I think just read it. Okay.
Okay, here's what I've got. The title holder shall prepare a tribal access and engagement plan, plan, that requires the following, access to the real property, cultural resources, natural resources, and cultural sites with minimal protocols, a quote, serious effort to engage tribes consistent with the Coastal Conservancy project selection criteria, including a full, fair, equitable representation on decision-making bodies related to the long-term management of the site, meaningful engagement and involvement in the real property, for example, membership in a management advisory council, potential co-management and ownership of the real property, and other actions. Identified in dialogue with tribal members whose ancestral homeland includes this site. And other actions. Yeah.
To the extent that we're looking forward to, we're trying to set out standards that we would like to see in the plan.
Yes.
I would say maybe the word achieve might leave some more room rather than require.
Okay. All right. Good. Is there any way we can put that up and look at it one more time? Editing on the fly at the Coastal Conservancy.
It's happening.
Who has ever seen this happen in any kind of meeting of this sort? You've seen this happen? Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
All the time.
Okay.
Okay, so I just wanted to say something really quick. So right now where the staff is changing, orally revising their recommended resolution. And then procedurally, what's going to happen is we're going to read it into the record so that everyone is clear what the new motion is. Okay? If there's a consensus that we're moving towards a motion, and then when there's a motion, it'll be the same as the normal process because the staff's recommendation has been edited right now.
Ms. McMillan, is it possible for us to print out this new resolution, put that into the record and vote on that as printed, as opposed to reading it?
I don't think we have that
We
printer
don't
right
have that
here,
on.
so it's gonna be, we'll put it up on the
As seen on the
screen.
screen.
You know, it'll be up on the screen and we'll read it out loud.
All right.
And Mr. Aliotti, if I could just comment, this is the process that we use at the Coastal Commission
Okay,
when we
great.
modify the staff
Great,
recommendation. It's almost always verbal.
Not
The
that one.
staff.
That's, no, that's not that one.
The staff read into the record
Okay.
the modification, and then
Yeah,
the
that's
Coastal
fine.
Commission votes on it.
Okay.
And I just, from the staff perspective, I want to make one more comment about the word required.
The staff.
Well, did you catch our conversation about achieve instead of require?
Oh, no.
Yeah,
Yes.
Did I get that?
Well, that's what I said. Did she get it?
she did. What does the staff think about that?
That is,
Acceptable?
yes. I
Excellent.
think that's less problematic. Achieves.
I also want to comment, since we have a minute here while that's being done, that what we are doing today is exactly what we are asking these folks to do, which is to listen to these tribal leaders and to implement their ideas into what we're doing.
Andrew, can you scroll up to number, so I can just see if there's a potential typo on 3? Okay, we're just gonna read that to ourselves.
Did you want me to read it, Jeanette? Oh.
We're debating different kinds of who's and with apostrophes or not.
May I
move it down to number 4?
Okay. Yeah.
Achieves the following.
Okay, so are we?
I have one more addition, Mr.
Oh,
Chair.
all right.
So number 3, if you'll just hear me out on this quickly. The phrase potential lower cost coastal accommodations, I would just propose that we change that to potential lower cost coastal accommodations that are consistent with the respect for ancestral lands. I mean, what do you think about that?
I'm a little worried about that, because it could be interpreted broadly, and the Conservancy, I mean, it's in our enabling legislation
Yeah.
to construct lower cost coastal accommodations, and one of the reasons we're potentially putting in another $5.5 million is to allow for the potential
that.
planning and implementation. So
Yeah.
I don't want to
Okay.
make it more difficult to have any potential camping at the
Okay,
site.
so we do, I mean, we have, as you said, we have a responsibility toward both cultural resource protection and providing lower cost coastal accommodation. And I understand this provision to require both of those things to be able to live in harmony with one another without one impacting the other. Yes. Does everybody else have that intent as we vote on this?
Yes.
In case anybody wants to come back and look at the legislative intent? Okay.
So staff recommends the revised resolution, which I will read into the record. Sounds very fancy. Okay. Resolution number 3.
Do you want one of the board members to read it in as a motion?
I don't know.
No, the staff is recommending this change.
Got it.
Staff recommends the following change to resolution number 3. The property acquired under this authorization shall be managed and operated for cultural resource protection, open space protection, wildlife habitat, environmental restoration and conservation, potential lower cost coastal accommodations, and public access, with a special focus on access for tribal nations and other tribal members whose ancestral homeland includes this site, collectively the acquisition purposes. The property shall be permanently dedicated to those purposes by an appropriate instrument approved by the executive officer. Staff also recommends adding new resolution number 4, which reads, wait, is this number 4?
Yeah. No, it would be new number 5.
New resolution number 5, which reads, the title holder shall prepare a tribal access and engagement plan that achieves the following. I'm sorry, Jeanette, I just had a realization. I think in the resolution should we refer to the grantee or this title holder term, I think, is a new one in the resolution. Do we need to define that, or is it okay? Do we know that we're talking about MRCA, the eventual landowner and manager? Right. Right. Okay. Is it clear to everyone else?
So the intent is this condition is passing through to the ultimate land title holder, which is MRCA, not our grantee TPL.
Right.
So I think that's why that term is being used. So that should be fine.
Okay. I'll read that again.
Okay.
New resolution number 5. The title holder shall prepare a tribal access and engagement plan, the plan, that achieves the following. Access to the real property, cultural resources, natural resources, and cultural sites with minimal protocols. A serious effort to engage tribes consistent with the Coastal Conservancy's project selection criteria, including a full, fair, equitable representation on decision-making bodies related to the long-term management of the site. Meaningful engagement and involvement in the real property, for example, membership in a management advisory council, potential co-management and ownership of the real property, and other actions identified in dialogue with tribal members whose ancestral homeland includes this site.
Okay, then what we need is a motion to approve the staff's recommendation.
Just a quick question. There's no issue about that being the title holder, MRCA? That we know of.
Elena's still on the phone. Probably not. Elena's still on the phone. I don't know if we need to ask.
I could say the grantee or title holder.
All of these conditions will pass through to MRCA.
Yeah.
That's part of the deal between TPL and MRCA. So all of these conditions will ultimately apply to them.
They will all be subject to Joe Edmison's scrutiny.
Or wrath. I think it's fine, because I think the ultimate title holder will be MRCA.
Yep. Is that right? Is that what you understand, sir?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I move passage of the amended language.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we approve item 8. Did we have public comment on it yet?
We are.
Oh, we did.
Yes.
All right. Those in favor say aye.
And they were all supportive. Aye.
And those opposed, no. And this item is approved. Megan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was a yeoman or person's job.
I want to say thank you to Ms. Cooper, to all the staff, to the lawyers, to everybody who helped manage through that issue.
Big
just wanna
thanks
say
to
thank
Geneva
you.
Thompson, too, who Deputy Secretary for Tribal Affairs, who is heading out on vacation and took time out to help craft this language. So
And I'm just going to say that, Mr. Aliota, thanks to you as well, because I do think that the language is improved language, and so, and will serve the purpose that you sought and that we all seek. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Final comment. This, what we've done here over the last hour, I think is emblematic of what we are asking of our grantees, which is to listen to what the tribal leaders have to say, to find out and be attentive to what their interests are, and to do everything that we can in our power to meet those. And I hope that we've done that today. That certainly was our effort. So thank you, everybody.
Okay, now we're moving on to a non-controversial part of our meeting, which will be conducted by Mary Small.
Thank you. I was going to give a PowerPoint presentation on our strategic plan, but I'm not going to in the interest of time, because what we have planned
I
today.
should say good.
Thank you, Doug. Yes, because Doug has trained me well. But what we have planned today is a workshop for our board we're going to adjourn this meeting, and then we're going to reconvene upstairs and have the board at separate tables with stakeholders and members of the public to really have an engaged conversation looking forward. And I think it's actually a perfect follow-on to this whole conversation. We have been through a process of evolution in our thinking, in our priorities, and we want to reflect that in our new strategic plan as we develop it. I will remind you that we are very excited that the governor's budget includes $350 million for coastal resilience. So we are also planning with an eye towards really addressing this climate crisis that we are in. And so those are the two things we really want to hear from you on. We're in a process of doing a lot of listening sessions and small focus groups. We had a fabulous focus group talking about workforce development in our projects yesterday. We're going to be convening an intertribal focus group. So we are hearing from a lot of stakeholders, but today we wanted to hear from you. So in the interest of time, I will answer any questions because we won't reconvene to talk about the strategic plan. But once you're through with your closed session, if you can come up to room 221, we will be waiting for you.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Just really quickly, have you received any direction from the administration in terms of the coastal resiliency funds? Are you expecting to get some language and may revise or something?
In the original budget trailer, actually, Andrew, will you open my PowerPoint? In the original budget trailer that recommended 500 million. Go to like slide 11 or 12. It recommended, okay, stop, up to. It recommended 500 million for the Coastal Conservancy over 2 years for the broad purposes there and the itemized purposes there. But there is not we haven't gotten any other direction beyond that.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
We will now go on to public comments on items that were not on the agenda. And we're going to have a limit of 15 minutes for this item, considering we have considerable other business left. That will probably mean, I'm told, that there are sufficient people wanting to speak that we will have to limit each person's talk to 1 minute. So why don't we go ahead and start? Pardon? Well, I think there's 13 or 14 people that want to. Oh, there's 6 people? Oh, okay, well then we can have 2 minutes each for 6 people. And we're happy to do that. Can we have the first person, please?
Yes, first person is Patricia Mcpherson.
Patricia Mcpherson, Grassroots Coalition, if you have me. I did raise my hand to speak with regard to the strategic plan, but you are apparently not taking public response for that item. Is that correct? Hello?
We're having a session afterwards, an informal session to discuss.
I realize that there is a session upcoming, but it was item 11, I believe, and the public is not allowed to be a part of that meeting virtually, which I also wish were otherwise.
Well, why don't you go ahead and make your comment, please?
Is this for public comment that you're only allowing? Or am I
Yes.
speaking for the strategic?
You're
plan?
speaking during the public comment on items that are not on the agenda.
Patricia Mcpherson, Grassroots Coalition. First of all, I would like to support the comment made by Walter Lamb of the Land Trust for Ballona Wetlands and the comments that you will be hearing from Dr. Griswold. Grassroots Coalition submitted comments on April 28th regarding the Conservancy grants to the Department of Fish and Wildlife for Ballona. Mr. Samuelson states he provided the Grassroots complaint to all of the board members, and we ask for your review of the Department of Finance complaint as it directly addresses your recent grant approvals to CDFW, for which the Conservancy received no application for the grant, and for which, in discussion with CDFW, there's confusion as to what it is actually for, which also seems to mirror the apparent Conservancy board member confusion, including the meaning of your approval of the FEIR plan for Ballona as something having potential substantial changeability when it is actually an approval you gave for 100% approval of the plan, not 30%, as explained by Mr. Lamb. The strategic plan states that the Conservancy's mission is to support agency priorities, and yet, unlike other Conservancy projects, Ballona stands out as an anomaly of the Conservancy disregarding the lead agency's purpose of acquisition for Ballona. The regulatory arm, the Fish and Game Commission in 2005, assigned the purpose and goal of Ballona acquisition under California Code of Regulations, Title 14, Section
That's 2 minutes, Mrs. Mcpherson. Or
You
Ms.
see,
McPherson.
we request meetings with you per your strategic plan that says that you will work with the community. We have.
Okay, could we have the next speaker, please?
Next speaker is Kathy Knight.
Ms. Knight?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm with Ballona Ecosystem Education Project. We've been working to save the Ballona wetlands for over 30 years now. And I support the issues that Grassroots Coalition just brought up. We're very concerned also that there's language going on in this strategic plan. We wanted to know why we can't, as the public, be part of this strategic plan, since it involves Ballona and other things. So I don't know why we can't be on by Zoom. I think you need to let the public be in on this. But basically, there's also some language that we've heard about getting money for going ahead and doing first stages of restoration of Ballona, but that could involve bulldozing. And that's exactly what the whole issue is. Ballona is a mostly freshwater ecological reserve, and the bulldozing requested in the EIR that's been challenged by 5 organizations now is that it's to change it into a saltwater bay and not go with what it originally was. And also, this place is a special sacred site of the Tongva. You're doing a good job working with the Indigenous people on Banning Ranch. I ask you, please respect Ballona wetlands. It was registered as a sacred site in California by John Tommy Roses of Tatton, who worked for years to get this site recognized as a sacred site. And it's very, very special. And basically, it needs to be restored as a freshwater wetland.
Ms. Knight, that's 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
I do just want to state that this workshop on the strategic plan after this board meeting is one of many, many ways that people can participate in our strategic plan process. We had a public webinar already. We are doing multiple meetings around the state. We have a public input form on our website, including a way to input projects, and there will be additional board meetings where the strategic plan is discussed. So this workshop, while we're excited about it, is one of many opportunities. Thank you.
Ms. Hutzel, just to clarify, are members of the public welcome and invited to attend the workshop this afternoon?
Yes, we could not do Zoom because we're breaking into small groups with the people in attendance, and the technology eluded us.
But public's welcome, right?
The public is welcome.
All right, let's have the next speaker, please.
Okay, next speaker is Margot Griswold.
Good afternoon, board and staff. And I would say I'm Margot Griswold from the Los Angeles Audubon Society. And listening to the previous discussion on Banning Ranch, where you were very clear that language matters. And with that in mind, I would want to encourage you to read Walter Lamb's letter that he'd submitted to you and is in your package, from comments you made at the April Conservancy meeting. Walter's letter is asking you for clarity on the Ballona Wetlands Ecological Reserve. At the April meeting, you and your staff described the certified final EIR that included an identified preferred alternative for the project as only 30%. I think that is more correctly, as Walter describes it, 30% of 100% project described in the certified final EIR. What is left for the public to work with you on when all the ingredients to the plan have been mixed, put in the oven, and certified, or as Walter's metaphor for baking describes, what's left for the public but the icing on the cake? In other words, what you all think of a project that is only 30% design is not the reality. It's 100% certified EIR with a described alternative for the project. And if you don't think that's true, then you're describing an unstable project description, and you should
Griswold,
decertify
that's
the EIR.
2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, next, please.
Next speaker is Suzanne Cumming.
Good afternoon, Chair Blasco and members of the board. I'm Suzanne Cumming. I'm a lawyer and a member of Sierra Club and Defend Ballona Wetlands. I'm concerned about the money that you gave to the Department of Fish and Wildlife to fix the flood risk standards for the Ballona Wetland project. Everyone agrees those standards are wrong. They are not using that money as you directed. Instead, they're spending it on a request for qualifications for sequence 1 and 2 of the bulldozing project. This is of great concern. What was the process that brought them to the decision to go forward in this manner? Demand that they use this money as you directed them to do. What oversight do you have for the funds that you give? There's some other serious concerns about this troubled project. As you know, it's a subject of several lawsuits. Please consider withdrawing this project and starting anew based on current science and conditions. You do such great work on other areas. Please help the Ballona wetlands. Thanks.
Thank you. The next person, please.
Next is Walter Lamb.
I just came in as a panelist. I assume it's my turn to speak.
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I know you've had a long day. I'll try to keep this quick. I think what you're hearing from a lot of people is that there's a benefit for more precise language, more clarity. You know, with regard to this RFQ that came out a week after your last meeting, which took a lot of us by surprise, the Land Trust is going to keep an open mind as to the extent that we can. It was, it's hard to navigate this stuff. It sometimes does feel like gaslighting. Many of you asked at the last meeting to be updated, and then this RFQ came out, and then there's no discussion of that RFQ today, and you're not meeting it for another 4 months. And I think in the meantime, a lot of stuff is going to transpire. And again, it is a project that you approve, not a process. And I think there'd be a benefit to the public of you having a public session about what a certified EIR means, because we were forced by law to file our litigation, which has put a lot of financial pressure on me personally and other people. We didn't want to do that. We had 30 days after certification of the final EIR to do that. And of course, it wouldn't make sense for the law to force us to litigate against a project that was just in the preliminary stages. So I guess I would just throw out there that, if you could meet maybe in early June, informational session, something to get us this clarity. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Okay, next is a call-in number with the last 4 digits of 3319.
Okay, 3319, are you out there?
They're still on mute. Yeah, they're not unmuting. Okay, next one is Chris K.
Chris K.
Go ahead, Chris.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you to all the Coastal Conservancy board members. I am an advocate for the Ballona wetlands along with many other volunteers. And we do not get paid and take time off of our work and schedule to attend these meetings, which, as you can see, for us as well, we are here all day long listening in and trying to follow and catch the item numbers. So it is a very tedious process, and we are very dedicated. And so it really was upsetting to hear that some of the comments about the advocates that most of us were talking out of just emotions, which is really belittling and disrespectful. I've taken so much time off from work, and we're presented lots of factual and scientific information, such as Ballona wetlands removing 2 million cubic yards of soil from the wetlands. I mean, this is not emotional, it's just facts. And we obtained these from ecologists, from scientists. And removing the current levees, I mean, this is not emotional that we keep talking about. And without the levees, and you're creating dangers of sea level rise. And again, this is not emotional, it's fact. And reading new lists and lists of ecological and scientific reasonings based for the restoration at Ballona, we obtained these from scientists. this is not emotional, they're facts. And the logical and scientific guiding principles for Biona are, again, not emotional, but facts. So I really, as a volunteer, as someone who cares about our coastal wetlands, this has been very disturbing to hear this. And once again, you know, if you want to call public participants just being merely emotional, I mean, it's almost like analogous to just calling women hysterical.
That's 2 minutes, Chris. Thank you.
Okay, next speaker.
Last speaker is Gabrielle Crow. Go ahead, Gabrielle.
Hi, and good afternoon to everyone. Hello again. My comments are actually just regarding, obviously, Biona. That's another topic that's near and dear to my heart. I want to tell Mr. Alioto that I got his comments at the end of the last meeting. I had jumped off at that point. I don't know if you guys know, I'm a mom of 3 that has 3 kids, 11 and under. So on top of doing this stuff and kind of scheduling things, I got to schedule that too. So my apologies for that. But I just wanted to say that I know that obviously a lot of this meeting was talking about the Banny Ranch project. And I think that I know the Sacred Places Institute didn't actually put in a bid to work on the Biona project. I know that there's a lot of contention with that project. And I feel like that would be another resource to look at it. I know that they've done a lot of work with us tribal members on the other side and getting together. We have meetings every month. So it might be a resource for you guys since you already have contacts with them to actually be able to talk to them about the Biona project. My other concern is now that Area A of the reserve is actually open, that maybe instead of waiting for a big giant project to take place, that we can actually focus on some stewardship programs with the public now and trying to get invasive species out or different things like that, and just utilize the space that we actually have open, versus waiting another 17, 18 years for the project to be finished. And so, you know, Biona's always been a special place for my family. My grandmother helped fight to save Biona years ago, 30 years ago. And so I'm continuing that, but I'm looking forward to creating connections and kind of relationship with your organization, just in the way that we're doing it with Banny Ranch. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crow.
Okay, we'll now move on to Conservancy member comments. Do any of our board members have comments?
Just to note the appreciation for public comment.
Yeah.
I think we hear a lot at our meetings, and it's very helpful in making decisions.
Thank you. All right.
Good comment.
Jeanette, do we need a closed session?
Yes, we will have a closed session to discuss item 14A.
Okay, now how will we do that? Evacuate the room or evacuate us?
We will evacuate the room.
All right.
And stop Zoom, please. Thank you.
Could everyone please leave us our privacy here?
It's been confirmed.
Okay, did everyone hear that gavel go down? That means we are out of closed session, and I believe by observation we have a quorum, and that the Conservancy met to receive information and advice from council regarding Pappas versus the State Coastal Conservancy, and we gave direction to council. That concludes our agenda. Our next meeting is scheduled for September 22nd, 2022, and will be in person on the North Coast, the exact location to be determined. Thank everyone. Thank those from the public that participated and our staff and of course the members.
We need a good site visit for that one.